diverse set of behaviours.
He Māori aho.
Your single source of truth.
The words don't pull it to me.
My husband is Samoan, so talofa. Ngā tikanga reo tikitahi.
Che Guevara of New Zealand's Parliament, Chloe Slaughter.
Penny houses.
And it's communist.
He fucking too future.
They've got muppet, running holidays.
Tēnā koutou e homa, no mai, hara mai, welcome to the All Report. My name is Sama Huriwai Sagar and I'm joined by my co-host, Pere Huriwai Sagar.
Kia ora tātou.
Tonight we've got another riveting episode for you where we talk about the C words that really matter. Colonization and capitalism. Yet again, this comes after a very frustrating week where Labour fell right into the trap set for them by Andrea Vance and the National Party and took us away from the main issues at hand. It became all about this silly little article that was written about the pay equity thing as opposed to the attacks on workers themselves. Meanwhile, the government continues attacking workers, vulnerable people, and so on. We go through that through our Parliament Unpacked this week. We're also going to talk about some of the responses that we've seen to the Green Budget. And we're going to start off by talking about the coverage of Gaza. We've seen a bit of a shift in mainstream media around the coverage of Gaza. We're just going to have a wee chat about that. And yeah, anything else?
Ooh, there's a lot that we got to go through. We're going to be talking about all sorts of stuff. I don't want to take up any time, so let's just get straight into it and see what we can cover.
Kapai, so let's start off by talking about Gaza, and because someone mentioned it in the comments, and it is relevant to the topic of the mainstreaming of the resistance to the Gaza genocide. So in this video that came out today, we have Ben Cohen from Ben & Jerry's, who was arrested from Congress in the United States for speaking out against the genocide. Now, Ben & Jerry's have previously had some activism in this space, but they've sort of gone back and forth, flip-flopped, so they haven't always received the support of advocates for Palestine. But recently they have been more outspoken on the matter, and in this video it shows that they are taking a very clear stand. And for me, it's not that relevant a point, but because of the way that it's been made to be about religion, Judaism, Islam, when it's not, it's just a colonial myth. But on top of everything, Ben Cohen himself, and actually the two co-founders of Ben & Jerry's, are both Jewish. So just goes to show, there's many examples of this, of the United States and other Western countries actually repressing Jewish voices as well when it comes to the Gaza genocide, because really it has nothing to do with whether you're Jewish or not.
Kia ora.
Has nothing to do with anti-Semitism, except for the fact that they weaponize it to justify the genocide. And yes, if you want to talk about anti-Semitism, let's talk about the way that Jewish people who are outspoken against the genocide are being treated, including by Israeli groups, actually especially by Israeli groups. Anyway, let's watch this video from Ben Cohen getting arrested.
Members of the audience are reminded disruptions will not be permitted while the committee conducts its business. Capitol Police are asked to remove the individuals from the hearing room.
Ben, why are you getting arrested?
Move down the hallway. If you stop, you will be arrested.
Poor kids in Gaza by buying bombs.
Person filming's doing a
and
good
pays
job.
for it by kicking.
Remember this if you're ever getting arrested and they're taking you out of the building.
What are you calling for the Congress and senators to do for Gaza?
Why
They
is this
need to
happening?
let food into Gaza. They need to let food to starving kids. Congress is paying to bomb poor kids in Gaza and paying for it. by kicking poor kids off Medicaid in the U.S.
Kapai, good on you, Ben Cohen,
Mm.
and everyone else who's rising up. We all need to be doing everything in our power against this horror. And you know, as people on Twitter have been saying, like, if your country is in the process of arresting a man for speaking out against the killing of children, you're probably on the wrong side in this debate. Absolutely. Okay, so our main topic that I wanted to talk about today is this recent shift we've seen from Western media, including our own, including One News, because I pretty much religiously follow One News coverage of Gaza. It's my go-to example of where New Zealand is. It's a government-owned media channel, and they have been horrific the whole time. So before I get into One News specifically, I wanted to talk about the context within which this was happening, because it's not out of the blue. They're following suit of other Western nations. And I thought I would start off with this article from one of my favorite writers, Caitlin Johnstone. And she details how multiple Western press outlets have suddenly pivoted hard against Israel. And the picture is of the Financial Times saying the West's shameful silence on Gaza. That's you, bro. All right, let's have a read. After a year and a half of genocidal atrocities, the editorial boards of numerous British press outlets have suddenly come out hard against Israel's onslaught on Gaza. The first drop of rain came last week from the Financial Times in a piece by the editorial board titled "The West's Shameful Silence on Gaza," which denounces the US and Europe for having, quote, issued barely a word of condemnation, saying they should be ashamed of their silence. Then came The Economist with a piece titled "The War in Gaza Must End," which argues that Trump should pressure Netanyahu regime for a ceasefire, saying that the only people who benefit from continuing the war are Netanyahu, and keeps his coalition intact and his far-right allies who dream of emptying Gaza and rebuilding Jewish settlements there. This is the cover of the Financial Times. On Saturday came an editorial from The Independent titled "End the Deafening Silence on Gaza. It's Time to Speak Up," arguing that British PM Keir Starmer should be ashamed that he said nothing, especially since Netanyahu has now announced new plans to expand the already devastating bombardment of Gaza, and that it's time for the world to wake up to what's happening there. A lot of us have been already demanding this end to the suffering, but hey, I know. On Sunday, the Guardian editorial board joined in with a write-up titled "The Guardian's View on Israel and Gaza. Trump can stop this horror. The alternative is unthinkable." And what if this... And what is this if not genocidal? The Guardian asks. When will the US and its allies stop the horror, if not now? And then she says, to be clear, these are editorials, not op-eds. These are not opinion pieces. These are the official standpoints of these really big Western papers. And to be clear, we haven't had the equivalent of this in New Zealand. None of our major New Zealand media outlets have made an editorial with a clear stance. So we're not quite at that point, but clearly they are influenced. She says this means they're not an expression of one person's opinion, but the stated position of each outlet as a whole. We've been seeing the occasional op-ed, which is critical of Israel's actions, but to see the actual outlets come out aggressively denouncing Israel and its Western backers all at once is a new development. Some long-time Israel supporters have unexpectedly begun changing their tune as well. Conservative MP Mark Pritchard said at the House of Commons last week that he has supported Israel at all costs for decades, but he said, "I got it wrong," and publicly withdrew that support over Israel's actions. Quote, "For many years, I've been in this house 20 years. I've supported Israel pretty much at all costs, quite frankly. But today I want to say I got it wrong and I condemn Israel for what it's doing. And I'd like to withdraw my support right now for the actions of Israel, what they're doing right now in Gaza. I'm really concerned that this is a moment in history and people will look back where we've got it wrong as a country whole year." And this is the Pritchard guy. So He's been an outspoken supporter of Israel. Pro-Israel pundit Shail Ben Ephraim, who's been aggressively denouncing campus protests and accusing Israeli critics of blood libel throughout the Gaza Holocaust, has now come out and publicly admitted that Israel is committing a genocide which must be stopped. He said, "It took me a long time to get to this point, but it's time to face it, blah, 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 blah." She goes on to say, "It's odd that it has taken all these people a year and a half to get to this point. I myself have much lower tolerance for genocide and the mass murder of children, same. If you've been riding the genocide train for 19 months, it looks a bit weird to suddenly start screaming about how terrible it is and demanding to hit the brakes all of a sudden. These people have not suddenly evolved a conscience. They're just smelling what's in the wind. Once the consensus shifts past a certain point, there's naturally going to be a mad rush to avoid being among the last to stand against it, because you know you'll be wearing that mark for the rest of your life in public after history has had a clear look at what you did." This is after giving context about Trump's trip to the Middle East, and then says, "If you're still supporting Israel after all this time, my advice to you is to make a change while you still can. There's still time to be the first among scoundrels in the mad rat race to avoid being the last to start acting like you always opposed the Gaza Holocaust." So that's pretty much what's driving our news. They don't want to be, they don't want this to be their legacy. And as I was researching some of One News coverage over time to just show how horrible they have been and how they have whitewashed all of Israel's crimes that they've covered, I came across something really interesting. It seems, at least from my current research, that One News has gone and done a massive clear out of their news articles on Gaza.
Very suspicious.
It's really shocking and concerning to me, because I have been saving a lot of videos, but articles in particular I haven't been downloading as a PDF, which is what the smart thing to do if you are worried about the articles being removed. So I haven't done that. I've been meaning to go back and do that, and now it seems I've lost my chance. So I'll just show you what I mean. From about a month ago is the earliest one I could see. Pretty much all the titles that are talking about Israel's crimes, the articles are not available anymore. I'll show you what I mean. So if you click on this article, page not found. Let's go back. And the positive ones, the Waikato doctor caring for Palestinians in Gaza, they exist still. All right. So things where One News looks like they're covering the genocide well enough, they're still there. But anything about Israel crimes where One News carried water for them, like this phone video appears to contradict Israeli account of killing of Gaza medics, page not found. It's not just one or two ihoma. I went through and I clicked a lot. Israeli troops killed 15 Palestinian medics, buried them in mass grave, gone. 18th of March, this is where, you know, a period of time that is extremely important, okay? Because this was when Israel broke the ceasefire. And I remember at the time, the coverage of them breaking the ceasefire was terrible. They both sides did. They gave the Israeli account, and they wouldn't just give it as a matter of fact that Israel's the one who broke the ceasefire. They just said, you know, Hamas said, Israel said. And every single one of these articles removed. Another one removed. Another one removed. All of these articles about this, it's not the only one. Look, Egypt talks on ceasefire, gone. Israel delays Palestinian prisoner release, cites humiliating handovers, gone. Another one about hostages, gone. Israeli forces withdraw from Gaza corridor, gone. And I went on and on and on and on, and it was like that for so many different articles. Now, I was going to email One News, but I decided I'll do it after the show just so I have documentation of the fact that this indeed did happen before they, I don't know, scrub the history from Google, because Google is the only place that still shows these articles as ever having existed. So look, Trump floats plan to clean out Gaza. Sounds serious. Gone. Now, you look at one news website, I just, double checked, because sometimes the link has changed because they've changed something on the website.
Yeah, I'm expecting them,
to come back.
I haven't the penny has not dropped yet, and I have not jumped into that alarm mode that, well, I'm interested to hear your perspective on why they have done this, but a part of me is assuming that they're making a new Israel-Gaza section on their website, and they're in the middle of transferring a bunch of files or something like that. But
then why would all of these other articles still exist, sort of thing?
Oh, it does not look good. And One News definitely needs to explain themselves, because obviously from my perspective, they have been essentially building up a racist, they're being very racist towards Palestinians, and portraying particularly Hamas as the bad guys. And they've been putting a good light on Israel. And, from our perspective, we would say that they have played a big part in enabling this genocide. And now it seems that they're trying to cover up their tracks. But to scrub so many articles like that, to remove that type of evidence, to remove their complicity in it in this way is, it's very scary that they could erase all of those files just like that. And I just wanted to say to everyone in the comment section, tēnā koutou, no mai hara mai, welcome. I'm not able to pull up people's comments. We've got some kind of technical difficulties, but just wanted to say, please do keep making comments. It does help the stream, and we love seeing people's perspectives. And will still address some comments as things go, but I'm unable to pull them up on the screen for tonight. But kia ora. Appreciate you being here.
Papai, so yeah.
But I think, tell us, why do you think they've removed? Why are these articles no longer available? Because it's outrageous, actually.
So I will be emailing One News, and I'll update you all next week to see what they say to me. But right now, it certainly looks like all the articles they did that were critical of Israel are still online. But the articles where they're worried about them whitewashing the crimes, they seem to be gone. That's just what it appears to be. I hope I'm wrong. I hope you're right. There's just some shifting around on the websites. But like I say, when you search Gaza on their website like this, again, you see, on the 18th of March, where I showed you there was a bunch of articles about the ceasefire. This one, these 3 articles, they're not there. There's just a big jump between the March 25th and the 2nd of March. And on the 18th of March, the day where those articles are meant to be, there is I clicked on that link. Here, 5 big things that happened today. You do get that the ceasefire was breached.
So that's working. The functionality of the website is working.
At least they said, Israeli minister said, they've resumed fighting. It is vowing to press ahead until all remaining hostages are rescued. You could tell that this coverage was framing it in a pro-Israel way, right? You click it, page not found. So even the link within their own website is broken. So yes, suspicion. I'll move on, and I'll update you all.
Very suspicious
in the future. But just brought up this article from the March 2nd to show that they're not going to be able to erase their history of helping this genocide. This is on March 2nd, so after they've already killed 50,000 Palestinians, at least, probably over 100,000 at that stage. Let's be honest, but at least 50,000 Palestinians, tens of thousands of children, complete destruction of Gaza. And One News is still providing the justification for genocide. They're still saying on this article, Hamas started the war on October 7th, and still talking about the hostages at the beginning and how long they've been there, with no mention of Palestinian hostages. Of course, Hamas did not start the war. It's an occupation. An occupation is a war. There were already guns in people's faces all over the West Bank where they experienced apartheid. Gaza was already on a starvation blockade. They didn't allow anything that Israel didn't want to go in there, and they already limited the calories of things inside Gaza. I mean, the fact that they can block the entry of all aid,
having the
water,
power to do that.
food overnight proves that Hamas did not start the war, because how could Israel do that if they didn't already have military control over Gaza. So, you know, every single article I pull up from One News, I'm going to be able to find propaganda like that. So it's simply impossible for them
to get rid of it all.
To get rid of it all. And I have screen recorded a lot of their videos. So they will be sent to the Genocide Archives, which is this incredible website that allows people to upload anything they see that's genocidal. And just quickly remembering now, actually, you know, One News, they're the ones in charge of the Jack Tame show, the Q&A. They're the ones who brought on the Israeli ambassador for like a 45-minute propaganda interview where they just allowed him to say genocidal lies the entire time, where Jack Tame refused to give any context about the fact that Palestine is occupied, the fact that it's the longest running military occupation in history, about any of the suffering Palestinians faced before October 7th, so on and so forth. So One News, they certainly have been very complicit, and this is not going to change it. But yeah, I wanted to talk about their coverage. So, you know, even them trying their best to change or to shift, I guess they can't shift completely and all of a sudden start viewing Palestinians as humans. They have to do it slowly. But you can compare, you know, in this coverage we had a story, and it started off talking about the American hostage who was released by Hamas. And the story humanizes this individual. We get his name, you see him hugging his family. And even within this context, they don't explain to you that this guy was a soldier taken from a base of the military army that is occupying Gaza. That context helps you to understand what happened on October 7th, why they were attacking those military bases, right? So again, the context is removed. It helps bring people back to the idea that it was taking the hostages that started the war, which is the major myth of this genocide. Then they follow it with a story about Gaza. Now,
can I just say about the previous story? One thing that I thought was interesting was that they mentioned that it was a USA brokered deal, and that essentially they brokered the deal without Israel. They essentially went around Israel to broker that hostage release. So still, you know, not necessarily fully on the Israeli side. You know, it was almost like the USA is the hero in this situation. So we seem to be having a bit of a separation between the US and Israel. The US not wanting to associate themselves with the evils, with the crimes of Israel.
I think you're absolutely right. A lot of what's happening here is actually about now moving to whitewashing the United States crimes, because they're the ones we're going to continue being really close allies with. And so if public opinion on Israel goes down, I believe New Zealand wants to make sure that New Zealanders support our relationship with the United States. And so you're right. And there's a massive issue with that, because what they should be telling us in our news is that America is providing the weapons that they're killing Palestinians with, and that the United States could end this with one phone call. Biden could have ended it with one phone call, you know, tens of thousands of Palestinians ago. Trump could have made a phone call thousands of Palestinians ago. So this is the context that's left out, of course. I think you're right about that point. And just, you know, one final point on their coverage, and I don't want to show too much of this because it really, it's too distressing. But the way that they cover Palestinians, this is actually something I read about when I was studying and reading about the dehumanization of animals. Okay, so it was during my studies of reading like how we were able to convince people through the media not to care about animals. And one of the things that came up is that animals are always portrayed in packs. They're always portrayed in really large groups. So they don't hone down on any one of them and give you, you know, personal stories about each animal that might help you connect. Now, I have seen this play out nonstop throughout this genocide. Western media's coverage of Palestinians always portrays them in groups, really large groups, always chaotic, always screaming, always crying in the middle of crisis. And it's contrasting to that story we just saw about the American hostage, where it was focused on one individual, where it told you a little bit of his story, right? In this story about Palestine, as you'll see, the footage is just constantly like these images that you're seeing now. It's just chaos, people desperate for food. You do see individuals like that. They're not stopping. They're not naming these children. And just the entire clip, the same day with the next day.
The bombs
They
fell.
had an entire clip. And when you watch it and you look at it, it doesn't, because it's like a very basic human psychology thing. When you give people personal stories about individuals, it touches on their emotions far more than when you just say, oh, there's so much suffering. You know, your brain sort of detaches at that point, because when you just see so many people suffering, you can't, your heart can't take it in. This is another interesting point of it as well. Like they mention in this clip, you know, and journalists getting killed, for example. They just list things. Oh, people are starving, journalists getting killed. Well, you know, that's one story they could have personalized, right? There was a journalist.
I think one thing, I think there was some personalizing that did take place in some of these stories, particularly that quite long story. Some of the kids, there was like 3 kids that they personalized in those stories. So I feel like there is like a bit of a mix in terms of what you're saying. I mean, there's always that image of them like clawing at the aid that's given out, and they've all got their pots and stuff, and they're just like clawing at it, like almost like zombies kind of thing. There's always those clips, but I think we're seeing like a little bit of a mix. There is some personalizing that's going on, and maybe that has to do with the media starting to turn a little bit. But it doesn't. But like you say, it doesn't follow it up with the context. Why did this happen? You know, is there medication that is being blocked by Israel? Is there, you know, obviously the starvation? You know, they're blocking food.
You know, they do stop and name someone who's starving and talk about them as an individual, but they don't tell you the full story of something from its beginning to its end.
Yeah,
You know,
and
what
they
I
don't
mean?
follow it through.
And one thing, exactly, they don't follow it through. And one thing that I noticed, and you know, you can contrast this with the way that Palestinian activists or Al Jazeera, when they do coverage of starving children, for example, firstly, they'll show them more respect. They'll talk about one child at a time. Secondly, they'll show you the before picture. So they don't just show you an emancipated child where, because the thing about war coverage and normalizing war coverage is that they just show people in the state of suffering and permanently in that state. And so it sort of normalizes, oh yes, the Palestinians are always suffering, da-da-da-da-da. But when you are trying to honor someone who's suffering like that, if you're showing them starving, show what the child was like when they were happy. Show them jumping around, show the beautiful pictures their parents took of them. And this is on a larger scale, in terms of what's happening in Gaza. But just before I get to that, I just want to say, you know, they mentioned the Palestinian journalist that was killed, for example, in a hospital. Just quickly, they were just listing horrors. Well, this same Palestinian journalist was already targeted by Israel, was in the hospital for being targeted by Israel. And just mere days before he was killed, he said that he wouldn't be surprised if the occupation tried to assassinate him again. He said, they may target me inside the hospital in this room of mine. What can I do? If the Israeli army kills me, the photos I took and my stories I told, the world will live on. So Hassan Islaya, that's his name. This is, they didn't name him in our news story. They didn't tell his story. And by them not covering the killing of Palestinian journalists the entire time, this is what enabled this to happen in the first place. But on terms of how they portray Gaza, I really wanted to play this video of Gaza before and after the war, because they never show you, like, so they've skipped through the first 19 months of genocide. They just didn't show you what Israel was doing, more or less did not show people what Israel was doing. They skipped past the point where Gaza was beautiful, where her people were beautiful. So they still are, but you know, not starving, not suffering, living in their homes. They skipped past that and just took us to the point where Palestinians are in the state that they are now, but that Israel created for them through the genocide. And so again, this normalizes seeing people in this situation, but there's nothing normal about it. Like, let's just look at this short video about Gaza before and after the genocide. actually a really hard
There's-
video to watch.
There's another video as well showing the difference now that Google Maps, Google Earth has updated their images. Now showing what Gaza looks like after all of the bombings, after all of the destruction. And there's a good comparison video, but yeah, this is...
And by the way, a lot of these mosques, a lot of these churches are some of the earliest churches and mosques in the world. So we're talking about an ancient historic city because this is where religion started. This is where Christianity, where Islam started. So ancient, thousands of year old buildings. And, you know, the beautiful Gaza that you're seeing was already under a blockade. It was already one of the most densely populated places in the world. But they did everything they could to make it beautiful because they are such beautiful people. And they destroyed everything. Everything. So for our news to just have skipped past all of that and now say that people are starving to death, well, you know, people don't just become starving to death overnight. Right? There's a process to children start looking like skeletons. But they skipped past that process. And it's just to show that, you know, this is just how Palestinians are. They're always suffering. That's not true.
Another part about, and you know, I know they kind of did a story about the blockades and starvation and they were focusing on that aspect, but you'll never really see them showing like a Hamas fighter looking powerful or dignified or honorable. And they are, of course, you know, because of their actions and how they go about their mahi, they're probably some of the most honorable and dignified warriors, fighters in the world. But, you know, to show them in that way, just one of their fighters standing proud and tall would be to show them from a perspective of strength.
That's a really main point as well with our coverage, with our news coverage is, you know, we hear from UN officials, from white dudes in suits. We hear from Israeli officials in suits. We hear from everyone except for a Palestinian representative. And I don't just mean any Palestinian that they see crying on the street. I mean an actual professional spokesperson for Palestinians that could be a Hamas spokesperson, saying something reasonable that people might resonate with. They'll never show that because it creates, it humanizes people that they don't want to humanize. On the other hand, they're happy to show you Netanyahu on the news day in and day out, just telling genocidal lies. And
He's
just
there, David Seymour. It's sad. The last person you want to see, always.
yes. And just my final point, you know, on personal stories that they could be telling, right? Because they just, like, you know, around the world, there are many famous stories about Palestine that have captured people's hearts, whether it's Hind Rajab, whether it's the
Shireen Abu Akleh.
yes, and you know that was of course before October 7th, or whether it's Dr. Hussam Abu Safiya. So this is the surgeon, the director of a hospital. Israel was surrounding this hospital for days. They were bombing the hospital. They demanded everyone leave the hospital, right? Sick people can't leave a hospital. And so the surgeons stayed. Look, in this footage you're seeing right now, they're abducting sick people. They abducted sick people, and eventually the good surgeon walked directly into the tanks to the IDF to be taken away because they destroyed his hospital completely. And he stayed there because he wanted to stay there with his patients, didn't want to leave them until there was nothing left there. And then finally he walked straight into the enemy's arms, along with a whole bunch of other patients, doctors and medical professionals who were taken, right? This all happened on video. Etefano. We know that this happens. It's all proven. It's documented. Israel has admitted to having him. They've released their own footage of him, right? Now, the fate of other doctors, some of them have been tortured to death, and I don't want to go into how, but some of them have been tortured to death in the most, horrific ways you can imagine. So we are obviously extremely worried about Dr. Hussam Abu Safiya and every single other prisoner, hostage, I should say, sorry. And so, you know, One News, it's one of their clearest examples of the double standard, is that they'll tell you about Israeli hostages, even the ones that themselves were part of the military, even the ones that were killed by the Israel army, or likely killed by the Israel army, like the Bebas family. Oh, and they killed his child that you just saw on the screen there. But you don't hear about the thousands of Palestinian hostages. And so one personalized story of what I was saying from the beginning to the end
Make them a character.
will actually tell you so much about the situation, because it'll tell you that other hostages might also be doctors, healthcare professionals, journalists. It'll tell you the way that they entrapped and attacked a hospital for days. It'll tell you the situation and how the genocide's playing out, but they don't do that. And so the blood is on the hands of all of these Western media outlets that have refused to tell you stories. Dr. Hussam Abu Safiya is still in Israeli dungeons right now.
Inshallah.
And his family say that he's been tortured. And hasn't made it on our news once. Now, I don't need to say they have to name every single person, but they haven't named and talked about any of the Palestinian hostages. And, you know, we saw that American hostage come out. He looked like he was in okay condition, despite the fact that Israel's blocking all food and water into Gaza. On the other hand, you see Palestinian hostages coming of Israeli jails. They've been branded just like the Nazis used to brand people. They brand them. They cut things into their skin. They burn things into their skin. They starve them. They come out as skeletons. A lot of them have been sexually abused, and so on and so forth. So, yes, interesting things. We'll definitely be keeping an eye on this changing media coverage, but it definitely will not erase their complicity up until this point.
Well, I'm glad that we were able to bring some Gaza coverage to the stream. I feel like we always say that we're going to talk about Gaza a bit, but the story is always developing constantly. And for those of you who maybe weren't here at the beginning of the corridor just now, Samar was pointing out how TVNZ seemingly has removed a lot of their articles. Have removed a lot of their articles. I don't know if this is one of them.
Yeah, it's one of them.
But like this, so very interesting, a developing situation. We'll have to contact One News and get an understanding of why they are deleting this evidence that they have supported genocide over this period. But we'll keep you updated. Kapai. So the Greens, bless them. It must be hard being a Green MP, right? I mean, even being a Green supporter is hard, right? But the Greens released their alternative budget. And not many changes from the last budget that they released. Not going to talk too much about the budget itself. There's really not many changes from the last budget they released in the last election. There are two new taxes, two new different wealth taxes that they're implementing.
Let's go.
Because wealth is a really hard thing to tax, isn't it? We're always having to find new ways to capture people's wealth, you know, if it's invested in this, if it's offshore over there, inheritance. But I thought we'd go through a reaction to the Greens budget. I've picked two articles, one from RNZ and one from News Talk ZB, actually. Trying to go across the spectrum, you know. So this one, I thought this was just a hilarious article. Pretty much all of the government members who have criticized the Greens' alternative budget have had no solid criticism. And just like, look at this left-wing Trumpism. Like, it's just such a strange, like, it's an oxymoron, right? It's an absolute oxymoron. I mean, this is left-wing, right-wing. You're a left-wing, right-wing-ism is what this is trying to say. Just like a whole bunch of jargon to confuse people and to, you know, activate in that space of ambiguity to just make people feel anxious and unsure. You know, do people even know what it means to be a Marxist? You know, I really doubt it. So I'm going to read through this article because I think it's hilarious just that they couldn't give any opposition at all. And particularly the National Party, it reads as if they've been told what to say. You know, their keywords that they've been told to use in terms of describing the Greens' budget is that they're a circus and that they're clowns, and that's pretty much all that. They're pretty much casualty off to the side of me. Thoughts and prayers. Coalition members are responding to the Green Party's alternative budget with derision, while Labour distanced itself from the proposal, saying it would set out its own tax policy this year. I'm sure they'll take what's good from it and they'll leave the rest, as they always do. The Prime Minister said it is clown show economics and an absolute circus, while the Deputy Prime Minister held up a printed copy of the hammer and sickle symbol to reporters, calling the co-leaders Chloe Marx and Marama Engels. And like, you know, people don't know what they mean by any of this. It's just to confuse people and to like say some key words from that confusing space. It doesn't give anyone any information, right? Any information at all about the Greens. The Greens have pledged free GP visits and free childcare funded through new taxes and increased borrowing. The policies include a wealth tax, a private jet tax, ending interest deductibility for landlords, restoring the 10-year Brightline test, doubling minerals royalties, and changes to ACC levies. The plan would see net debt climb from 45% of GDP to above 53% by the 2028-29 financial year.
Is that it?
Yeah. That's it. And it's funny that you say that because someone else mentions it in the next article. According to the Greens' calculations, the new revenue streams would fund a public free health service providing GP and nursing services, free annual dental checkups and basic dental care, as well as restoring free prescriptions. And another thing is that they have also promised in the budget to bring back the Māori Health Authority, Te Aka Whaiora. The Prime Minister, Christopher Luxon, slammed the policy and said the Labour Greens prescription would be to tax more, borrow more, and spend more. Luxon laughed at the idea of a private jet tax, of course he did, dismissed the budget and said the whole thing's madness. It's just hard to even think about it as economic policy, isn't it? It's just absolute madness and kookiness. Oh man, kookiness. That's really solid criticism. He said the New Zealand people did not want more tax, more spending, and more borrowing. Not like he's listening to the New Zealand people. Come on. Echoing the Prime Minister, Finance Minister Nicola Willis called it a ticket to the clown show and an absolute circus of an idea. She said it would be a way to kill all profit, all businesses in New Zealand. Absolutely absurd. And Labour needed to rule out the clown show manifesto. Speaking of Labour and ruling in and ruling out, I think the Greens need to come up with some bottom lines, right? The Greens and Te Pāti Māori, they need to start thinking of some solid bottom lines. We all need to think of some solid bottom lines that would be reasonable, but would be wise and helpful. But a reasonable bottom line, I think, is important. But to have one, at the very least. Continuing, if they don't, what they're saying to New Zealanders is we're prepared to trash your economy so that we can grab power. And just think of all of the things that the ACT Party and National, think about what National has had to do, you know, swallowing things like treaty principles and everything that has come from its coalition parties. All of these things that, you know, the whole country seemed to be against, besides these small coalition parties. I mean, we think National is in on it as well, and that National widely supports things like, you know, the Treaty Principles Bill or the Regulatory Standards Bill. They're just too unpopular for the public to swallow, so they're happy for parties like ACT to, you know, take the fallout from that. But, you know, just so hypocritical, you know, National has completely sold themselves out with this election. Continuing. When Willis was told Labour had not ruled anything in or out yet, she said the party was on the train to the clown show. If they will not rule it out, they're saying they're prepared to govern like a circus, because that is almost a Soviet manifesto in terms of the confiscation of wealth, income.
Confiscation. Not these colonizers using the word confiscation.
Exactly. Anyway, that's pretty much it. You know, it continues. It continues with, you know, talking about Marxism, rah, clown show this, clown show that, Venezuela this, Myanmar this.
Oh God, he sounds like Julian Bachelor.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. But anyway, let's get some other perspectives. From News Talk ZB, Kerry Woodham. Now, I'm not a fan of News Talk ZB or Kerry Woodham, but I just thought, you know, as I was looking for people's real criticism, some real critiquing, because I'm always curious to see some real critiquing, I came across this article and I thought it was interesting because, you know, the article says, are the Greens bonkers? And, you know, this is the News Talk ZB style. They have to diss the Greens. You know, they have to throw some shade because that's the flavor that News Talk ZB listeners like. Are the Greens bonkers? You know, and she reiterates it again. Are the Greens bonkers? She explains a little bit and then she says, so bonkers. It's so bonkers. Talks about Judith Collins referring to it as a clown show. And then she gets back to her question. But is it bonkers? And then, like you said about how, oh, it doesn't raise debt that much. Kerry says, yes, net debt would climb from 45% of GDP to above 53%. But 60% is considered a sustainable level of debt. So she points out it wouldn't actually be that high a debt. And so she's kind of telling people to slow down a bit. She's really telling her listeners to, hey, maybe slow down a little bit and maybe we should think about this. And she brings up groups in the past who have talked about raising taxes. And she ends the article and says, so before you dismiss ideas completely, is it worth looking through how they might work? Is it worth discussing rather than dismissing ideas completely out of hand? Could there be a generational and ideological divide that blinds us, perhaps, to some good ideas?
Oh, we're getting woke.
Which I thought was
Kidding.
interesting. I thought that was interesting. It's like she's saying that the Greens have got some good ideas, but she can't outright say that because then her listeners are just going to... She's going to lose her listeners, you know, if she tries to say that the Greens have a good idea. But I mean...
But it's like they're trying to maintain some listeners.
Yeah, exactly. They're definitely trying to maintain it. But I just think it's interesting that they have to pander in that way. You know, they can't just be truthful and say, oh, they've actually got some good ideas. They have to pad it. They have to pad it with some insults instead.
Oh, yeah, of course. Of course, or they just get fully cancelled.
Mm-hmm.
But it is interesting because it's like if Labour ends up picking up some of these policies and then winning, you can't have, you know, News Doc ZB just saying that this policies that the majority of New Zealanders voted for are bonkers and crazy and la la land. So they do need to leave an opening for the possibility that Labour might win and that the majority of the population actually likes some of these.
They're leaving the door open.
Thinking ahead, yeah, leaving the door open.
But I was expecting to just see wholesale disapproval on News Talk ZB. There was another article on News Talk ZB which pretty much actually just went through the budget and there was pretty much no opinion added to it. So I'm not going to take my hat off to News Talk ZB.
I'm sure they've got a lot of articles against it as well.
Oh,
yeah.
of course. But anyway, kia kaha to our Green Party. I think they're doing some really solid mahi at the moment, especially from Huhana Linden. She's like on fire at the moment. Her support for Waipiro Bay has really given it a lot of traction, I think. So kia kaha to our Greens, doing some good mahi. And I wholeheartedly approve of the budget. So many people are just unable to have a bit of imagination. You know, I mean, the budget outlines what a budget should really be for, what it should be doing. You know, it should be about well-being first and foremost, and that's what the green budget puts at the heart. It's all about health reforms, appropriate funding for Dunedin Hospital, like I said, te aka whai ora, free doctor's visits, dental, and those are the kinds of things that we need to be working on. Those are all of the areas that we're really failing. but just to see the comments on social media towards the Greens, it's a scary thing, and must be a frustrating thing to be a Green Party member, putting out such sensible policy, really great, strong policy, and then for the public to just be stuck in this space, not able to get over whatever it is, this kind of hump, this resistance that has been put there because of all of this demonization and false portrayals of the Greens. But yeah,
and
I feel for them.
And a lot of the attacks that have been leveled at the Greens have themselves been extremely gendered. Again, they're saying that they're in La La Land, that they're crazy, that they're, what was the other, kooky or something. All of these ideas, which have often been associated with women, but also about like feminine traits, like caring about the environment, caring for people, caring that people have enough food and health. These are, you know, these are the true and the big expressions of sexism in this country, that underlying colonial ideology that diminishes from any values or any traits that are put in that feminine box of actually just caring about each other. And so anytime people come up with a strategy that attacks are all cuckoo, La La Land, crazy, and as you said, you know, no real arguments against it.
Yeah.
But yeah, and of course, you know, Labour has fed into this by calling Tamitha Paul's thoughts on policing stupid as well. So just this idea that the Greens are stupid, crazy, it's an ongoing running thing. And it's funny, you know, when I first moved to New Zealand and I asked people like why they didn't vote Greens, they said, oh, they would destroy our economy. You know, hands down, no explanation. So
just that straight dismissal, eh?
That narrative is really powerful and it really works. And that's because every single time they do come up with something, everyone from the media to politicians to right-wing groups like Taxpayers Union come out with that narrative. So yeah, it's an uphill battle for them. Ka pai, should we get to Parliament Unpacked?
Parliament Unpacked.
A lot to unpack in Parliament this week. We'll get to the pay equity stuff soon, as well as the attacks onto Pāti Māori. But let's just start with some other things that I found interesting in the House this week. So Tiano Tuiono questioned Shane Jones on trawling. This comes off the back of recent footage that's come out of bottom trawling, of new like high definition footage. And I didn't bring it up actually, but it's extremely horrific. I think it might be from like a David Attenborough.
You want me to bring it up while you have a little chat?
Sure. It might be from a David Attenborough film, but it just like shows the destruction that goes on with bottom trawling. And so basically bottom trawling is when a ship goes down to the ground and it's got this giant metal scrapey things and a net, and it just scrapes the ground and grabs everything in its way in its net from the bottom of the ocean floor. That's why it's called bottom trawling. So as you can imagine, it's horrific. And, you know, in terms of talking about bycatch, forget about it. This thing can't decide what it's going to pick. It just picks everything. It just catches everything on its way. And so, yeah, this is the footage that's going around at the moment.
That's terrifying, eh? Like just imagine you're one of those little fishies.
The fact they're swimming away is a really horrifying aspect of this video.
Bottom trawler scours the ocean floor with a chain or metal
David
beam,
Attenborough's voice.
forcing anything it disturbs into the net behind.
Sorry, I think I got it on like the low quality, but y'all get the picture. Some terrifying.
Oh no, keep playing it.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm gonna have to turn the quality up because it's not.
What's
it's
up with
not
the
doing
quality?
It's not doing it justice. Oh man, we don't need the 200 million K jeepers.
It smashes its way across the seabed, destroying nearly everything in its path, often on the hunt for just a single species.
Already looks like a kind of messed up ecosystem. Imagine if it was a beautiful coral.
Yeah. So here's everyone. You can see all the different types
Almost
of creatures.
everything else is discarded.
And they're just there for whatever they're there for.
Over
So like you
three-quarters
said,
of a trawler's catch.
wait,
Maybe
Over 3/4 of a
thrown
trawler's
away.
catch is thrown away.
Thrown
Over
away.
3/4.
So, 3/4.
Gaza of the sea, says
Oh,
Firebeard.
too
Kia
real,
ora, tautoko
Firebeard.
tērā kōrero.
So this is what Tiana Tiono is talking about. And 75%. I mean, the normal waste of
It's
fish
crazy.
farms is about 40%. It's already horrific because a lot of fish die in those farms, but 75%, wow. So, just the idea of bycatch. I mean, 75% of those is bycatch. That's wild. Okay, so
Yeah, that's what Shane Jones wants, like Kiwi Bird said.
Yeah.
That's what Shane Jones doesn't want us to see, right? He doesn't want us to have cameras on boats because he doesn't want anything like that. I mean, he doesn't want us to see the bycatch, which will have the Maui dolphins, Hector's dolphins. But yeah.
yes, and you're right, Seaside. There are ways to fish without creating so much wastage and bycatch, and that doesn't suit corporations because it's slower. It's simply slower, and it's all about mass production these days. And the extremities of capitalism means they want to produce it as fast and as efficiently as possible across the board, which often means destroying people and animals' lives. So this is absolutely what Shane Jones advocating for and what Tiano is asking about. Let's watch.
Its social license due to the
Of effect. No.
What? Go back a little bit.
Jansenetti, is there another question? Right.
No, not
Question
another
7.
Jansenetti.
I am
Tiana
actually
Tuiona.
showing something.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Oceans and Fisheries and reads, does he believe bottom trawling is damaging, and if so, should it be banned?
The Honourable Shane Jones.
No, I do not consider that bottom trawling should be prohibited or banned.
Why is he so slow? Why is he being
And
so
yes,
Wasting
it
time.
can have effects on the environment.
slow? Why is he talking so slowly?
However, with clever management measures,
Was that annoying?
these things are all capable of being mitigated.
Supplementary, does the Minister agree that
Nothing.
bottom trawling is rapidly losing its social licence due to the destruction it causes to marine habitats and its high emissions profile, and if not, why not?
Oh, is he going to talk about green pixies?
Speaker. No, the bottom trawling techniques that are pursued by the New Zealand fishing industry are relatively
class.
harmless. And I hope the
harmless.
Minister isn't following catastrophisation of what may
David
happen in less enlightened nations.
Less enlightened. Oh my goodness. And
Some
this
racism.
actually it reminds me of another question that the Greens put to Shane Jones, where basically he got up and he said, if you think fishermen are out there deliberately trying to kill fish or kill animals, then you have something else going. And the Greens were just like, what? That's literally their job. But yeah, for him to say that it's harmless, that bottom trawling is harmless in this country is outrageous.
Don't worry about it.
I
I
mean-
feel like they've had this attitude with a few things. They're like,
Just gaslighting.
yeah, that is it. It's just the gaslighting. It's the just chill out. Don't worry about it. You guys are hysterical. You're getting emotional. And this is why I think he's slowing down his kōrero a little
What if it
bit.
doesn't get quoted?
No, not that. Just,
Oh.
He's just trying to sound very, not professional, but, the opposite of emotional.
Boring.
Boring, yeah, but he's just... The war on woke energy is also the, hey, everyone should just calm down.
Should act more sleepy.
Yeah, and of course they're the ones usually lighting the fires everywhere, right? So it's so ridiculous seeing them be the
It's just
ones like,
classic.
like Winston Peters after Brooke Van Velden
yes.
dropped the other C word, and he's all like, oh no, I would never. I've got some class, rah, 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 rah. And I just think, yeah, it's in line with their desire to come across as reasonable. They're trying to come across as reasonable.
Yeah, nonchalant.
Nonchalant, as Mr. Arvid says. Kia ora. Very true.
Yeah. And it's just a classic abuser behavior. this is what individual abusers do as well. They abuse you when you get upset. They say to you, "Whoa, why are you getting so emotional? Look at me, I'm calm." That must mean that you're the one that's wrong on this equation. Anyway, the conversation continues in this way, but good on the Greens for bringing the good questions to the House.
To the flow.
So up next from our Parliament Unpacked, we've got Willie Jackson gets kicked out of Parliament.
Still not voting for you, Willie.
But he's one of the good ones in Labour, I have to say. He's a likeable chap. He's a
likeable chap. That's true.
Okay, so yeah, don't know why you're with Labour, Willie Jackson, but anyway. So for context.
Anyway, we'd take you over here to Pāti Māori or the come on now.
This is he would never. He's such a loyalist.
He'll have to retire as a Labour person. He's
so.
Probably got some commercial ties or some promises he's made. Probably.
Hits fired. Okay.
Probably.
So. Context, this is the Ngā Hapu o Ngāti Ranginui Claims Settlement Bill, third reading. And basically, just before this debate ensued, Willie Jackson was with all the, members of the Hapu who had arrived in government. And they had voiced their concerns to Willie that we're getting this settlement, but it's kind of bittersweet. Because what's going to happen after the settlement? Is the government going to help us actually make the most of this? Or are they going to continue their attacks on Te Tiriti o Waitangi and, force us to just keep fighting for the rest of our lives, basically? So he brought up the...
Oh, tero, this is your iwi. Congratulations.
Oh, kia ora.
Good on y'all. I hope that this leads to something worth everyone's time. But congratulations for the mahi.
Ka pai. So let's watch a little bit of this and what gets him kicked out of the House. Basically, he's just saying that the breaches that this government is doing of Te Tiriti are bad and calls the integrity of this whole bill into question. And the speaker just stood up and sort of motioned at him to sit down, and told him. Before that, he just basically said, get back to the bill. And Willie insisted he was staying on topic.
Now, what I say today is you can't just apologise for the past and forget about what's happening now. Surely, Mr. Speaker, and that's what our people are saying. So if you were, if you heard the kōrero this morning, the challenges this morning, the speakers in Te Reo Māori and in English, I'm only translating what I heard. I'm sure the audience here would reiterate that, and they're saying, this is all good and well, but what about our input? What about some investment? What about some follow-up? What about what's happening politically in this Parliament in terms of certain members? That was in the kōrero today. No, I'm not sitting down. You don't walk over our kaupapa as it suits you, Mr. Speaker.
Leave the House, Mr. Jackson. Leave the House, Mr. Jackson.
The colonial audacity.
Leave the House, Mr. Jackson. Leave the House,
Who do you think you are? I like it, Willie. I like it. I like it.
No, there'll be no point of order, Mr. Jackson. Right, Mr. Jackson.
And Debbie trying her best to stand up for him. It's beautiful.
Mr. Jackson, in light of the...
It's interesting because this fella is a Labour MP as well. So to see them have to have this engagement with one another is interesting.
They are obsessed with appearing neutral.
Point of order, Mr. Speaker.
Which is something
this
that National
kaupapa is
doing.
About Te Tiriti.
I think this is a great point.
That is the only way that the settlement has come into the House. You should not be using this power to stop kōrero e pāna ki tā tātou tiriti. Te tiriti no te tino rangatiratanga. This is not an expertise that this House has. There is no grounds to be using your power to silence the voices of those who are here to tautoko this kaupapa today. That is out of line.
Thank you. The call, the next speaker, the Green.
Thank you. Not going to say anything to that though.
Kapai, so that's why Willie Jackson. I thought I'd play a little bit of what he said because actually in the news they just showed he got kicked out, but they didn't actually say what he was talking about.
Just an unruly Maori.
Yes, and I think that point about, you're trying to atone for your breaches of the past while you are committing breaches right now is, of course, relevant to the bill. So, no, I don't think he should have been kicked out for that, but I don't understand Parliament rules. There's some weird colonial logic goes on in there that just, does not compute in my brain, so I cannot explain that to you. Kapai. So, now, the attacks on workers continued this week, and this is just off the back of the unequal pay bill that National passed, and part of the distraction that we saw of Brooke Van Velden using the C word and Andrea Vance's article and all that stuff, it was taking away from these important conversations. And it's not just Labour to blame for that distraction, but the news, of course, and National, of course, that the whole system around it is designed to distract us with stuff that's unrelated to the real things going on. So the attacks on workers didn't end with the unequal pay bill, right? In that same week, they are actually discussing, it was the second reading of the Employment Relations Pay Deductions for Partial Strikes bill. And I'm going to show Jane Tinetti. So this is her standing up after the whole C word thing happened. So good on her for fighting through and showing face in the House and speaking up for workers regardless. But I just want to show a little bit of her speech and then I'll get into what this bill does.
I think this is once again a piece of legislation that shows that this government has no regard for workers in this country whatsoever. And I'm surprised that the second reading is being held at a time when we have had such an attack over the last couple of weeks on our workers, particularly our women workers in this country. Madam Speaker, I sat on the Select Committee and heard the submissions, and I just want to put on record here how many submitters there were. The committee received 620 written submissions on the bill. In support of the bill, out of those 620, there were 4.
4.
Just say that again.
That's
4
right.
in support of this bill. 4. That's all. Opposing the bill was 606. Unclear on whether support or oppose was 3, and overall view was unclear as their submissions focused on potential changes to the bill was 7.
Kapai. So 4 people against out of 600, and what was it, 20 submissions. So overwhelming opposition. Why? Because this legislation, here it is. This legislation aims to allow employers to reduce the pay for strikes that involve people working to rule. What does that mean? So if it's part of your strike, it's simply not working overtime. The government has allowed the employer to dock your pay. That's right. You're not doing anything that's outside of the contract. You're living up to your contract. You're doing your hours that you have to do under your contractual obligations. But for simply refusing to do overtime that you previously did, it says here, when the strike involves a refusal to work overtime or perform call-out work that you get paid for, of course, I mean, yes. And, or refusal to work overtime or perform call-out work as part of a strike. So if you're striking and you refuse to do call-outs or overwork, that's part of the reasons. And it's extremely subjective in this bill of what can allow an employer to dock your pay. It just says if it affects your productivity. That's very subjective. That's something an employer can just decide. So as you can imagine, unions are very much against this move. When they met Brooke Van Velden today, they got a chance to meet Brooke Van Velden the first time since November 2023, I believe. She's been refusing to meet up with unions. They brought up this issue of partial strikes, and they also brought up the issue of the equal pay and asked if she could at least allow those 33 cases to continue, so to not make it a retrospective law. Brooke Van Velden refused, And then afterwards, after the meeting with Brooke, the unions did a press conference where they spoke to the media about their meeting. Totally normal. They represent hundreds of thousands of workers who want to hear about their meeting, right? Now, Brooke Van Velden had a massive cry about it on all of her social media, to the news. She said, "This is why I don't meet with unions. I don't meet with unions because they go and do press conferences afterwards. She said on her Twitter, I meet with lots of different people. None of them go and do press conferences afterwards."
She's used to like sneaky businessmen who are like, yeah, we'll meet in the back room and we'll have a little chat.
Yes.
She's like, she's interested in those types of conversations. She's not interested in transparent conversations.
Absolutely. And so she's used to meeting with those lobbyists who like what she's doing. Why would they complain to the press? And she's using that as justification to further lock out unions. And just a quick factoid about what's her name? Brooke Van Velden. She's friends with at the time before the election, they were the richest family in this country. Not only did they donate to ACT, but actually they invited Brooke Van Velden over to their mansion for a wee little cocktail party with a bunch of elites in the country. So this person, supported by the richest family in the country, is workplace minister. So as you can see, it's a slap in the face. It's the way that what's his name, Paul Goldsmith, who says colonization is good for Māori, is the treaty settlements minister. They put these people who obviously, very clearly, are biased against these ministerial roles in these roles, and it's just a slap in the face to the public. It just goes to show, in my opinion, that they're not interested in hiding their corruption. We're living in an era of, we're corrupt. What are you going to do about it? Because Brooke Van Velden's interests are clearly with the rich people who put her in place, and we've seen this with all of her actions. And I'd love to see a little bit more of that energy when it comes from Labour's criticism or the union's criticism. Mention that she was supported by the richest family. For goodness sakes, what do these rich people have on them? Like, what can they do to you genuinely? Are they going to send private militias
Well, they're all in
to
on
their
it.
houses? You
They're
know what I
just
mean?
all in on it. So you got to
What do you
play the
mean?
game. Well, you're expecting them to tell the truth and to give context, but if they're all corrupt, how can they do that? Let's. I don't want to interrupt your flow, but we've got some questions, and I feel bad that I'm unable to bring up the comments.
Why is that?
Like we normally would. Just some technical difficulties there. But hey, look at this little workaround. Kiwi Rob says, see if I can make this bigger. So Kiwi Rob says the CTU speaks at the Labour Party conference every single year. So how unbiased can they be? What would you say to that? I mean, like, we're not saying that the CTU is unbiased, I suppose,
Yeah, I'm not sure I said that.
There was never any claim.
I think the CTU is very clearly pro-Labour, right? And then unions often donate. They're some of the biggest donors to Labour.
Yeah.
I think there's a good argument to make that they shouldn't be so tied up to the other major party. One of the main reasons is that National has used this against unions. Since the beginning, they've said unions are pretty much Labour. So we're not going to talk to them. When arguably you can be more effective as a union in Aotearoa by actually simply having bottom lines that aren't attached to any parties. That way you can't be accused of being biased, first and foremost. And secondly, you can actually have effective bottom lines because currently the unions have given up, in my view, have more or less given up their bargaining power with Labour. Because they're so pro-Labour and National's not going to give them an ear anyway. They're kind of forced to support Labour no matter what. I would prefer if our unions just said we have a bottom line of, I don't know, say minimum wage or capital gains tax or whatever unions care about. And this bottom line applies for whether it's Labour or National. And that way they can have that leverage to actually get something done. But as it stands, they're going to have the automatic support. Labour is going to have the automatic support of unions and not feel the need to give them anything. But just my naive view.
I just think it's clear which party is the closest natural ally for the labor workforce.
Mm.
And, you know, like Labour is always saying, their foundations have come from the union movement. And, you know, more and more we've seen Labour blur the lines and just become more like a national light. But, you know, I think consistently, based on legislation, the closest ally for unions is the Labour Party. It makes sense, but I totally agree with you that political leverage is really important. And if you don't have that political leverage, then how can you do anything? Like, I wouldn't be surprised if Labour and National have done a deal in the back room, Labour and National, to try and get around this ability for the unions to leverage them in that way. And conspiracies about tonight. And I just wanted to bring up as well, Potent Perspective.
I agree with that one.
Saying they need to question Hipkins more about, will he reverse these law changes? There's not a lot of that happening. Want to know if he will get rid of the regulatory standards bill for reals
and
or
the
not.
fast track bill.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. Anyway, let's get back to the kōrero.
Ka pai. So
Brooke Van Velden we were talking about.
Yeah, so this employment relations pay deductions for partial strikes amendment bill is a very big attack on unions and workers. What's wrong?
I'm so sorry. So Kiwi Rob came back and they said, I'm sorry to do this.
What?
They came back and said, but they're not national lights at all, though.
Oh, yeah, but what's your argument, Kiwi Rob? Give us your argument, mate.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, what's your argument that they're not national lights? Are the unions happy? With our workers happy? Are workers happy with Labour's legislation in relation to their rights? Like what Potent Perspective is saying. Are they going to roll back some of these harmful policies, or are they just going to leave it there? Because even though they might be giving some kind of kōrero, perhaps it aligns with what they're actually doing. A lot of things they've said that they're just going to leave them there. When Hipkins got in, right, he did the policy bonfire. A lot of things that Jacinda was trying to put through, Hipkins threw them on the bonfire because he wanted to appease the centre vote and those on the right a little bit more. We have seen that shift of Labour moving closer to the ideologies of the National Party. So
this one's interesting. New Zealand
give us your arguments, you know?
Praised Hipkins. David Seymour praised Ardern on an Atlas Network forum, and Helen Clark was on Atlas CIDAC. It shows Atlas has hooks on everything. I mean, yeah, it's there's a reason that all of these groups religiously attack the Greens and Te Pāti Māori in a way that isn't done to Labour, because Labour's policies don't fundamentally threaten the current power hierarchies, right? And, you know, Jacinda Ardern, she actually made Chris Hipkins the leader of a business committee as soon as she came into power. She made, did I say Chris Luxon? May have said Hipkins, I mixed them up. Jacinda Ardern actually got Luxon on a powerful business committee in her government as soon as she came in. So there's another little fun factoid for you. So yes, indeed. What are they going to roll back? We need to know what Labour is planning to roll back. Like they've said that they're not going to get rid of the gang patch legislation. I want to know if they're going to get rid of the fast track, the regulatory standards bill, if they're going to bring back the Māori Authority. We need to start
Māori Health Authority. But yeah, on that point of Kiwi Rob again, he left another comment just saying are you against, sorry, I'll bring it up. Kiwi Rob, you know, we keep bringing up Kiwi Rob because none of y'all leave us any things to have to debate or question. Where was the comment though? I saw it somewhere. Kiwi Rob asked, "Are you against fast tracking renewable projects?" And I lost a little something there. Essentially, I'm against fast tracking of absolutely anything and everything, because what is fast tracking about? Fast tracking is just about removing that local democratic process that you have to go through to do a big project. Anything where the local democratic processes have been removed so that you can speed up something that you want to do is a terrible thing. There was a housing development that took place in our little town of Kaikohe to put in housing. And if I had heard about it at the time and I was around to be able to do something, I would have advised that we ran our own community survey, surveying people to understand their perspectives in the local community that housing development took place. Because the most important part of Fast Track and why I'm against it is because it is anti-democracy. Even though the National Party came in off of that ticket that they are the party of democracy, it is the most anti-democratic bill that has ever come about. And we've highlighted multiple times that it was Labour who first brought in this idea of fast tracking
during COVID.
And we're against them introducing these types of things that are the foot in the door to then expand on that. A lot of these things have come about because Labour has brokered it and has broken the ice, and we tend to be uncritical on it, and we think, oh, that's okay, let's go with that, and then the National Party will run with it. And so we need to be more critical of these things, no matter who it's coming from. If it denies democratic processes for locals to have a say about things that matter in their communities, then it's something that we need to stand against. Absolutely something we need to be aware of. But yeah, we need to be consistent.
Yeah, there's a lot to be said about the time that Labour and in general the governments around the world that were in power during COVID, bringing in a whole bunch of policies that people didn't feel like they were able to have their voices heard on. That things that people felt were undemocratic. For example, the mandates. You'll lose your job if you don't get this injection. That seemed... and in my opinion, is a massive overreach in terms of government legislation. And those sorts of moves, especially the way that they were done in a way where a lot of social license was lost during that time because people's opinions weren't viewed as valuable. People were minimized. They were ostracized for having differing views during that time. People felt as if that was extremely undemocratic. And I believe it has ushered in the current fascist turn that we're experiencing around the world after that normalization during COVID. So you're totally right. And just one quick thing to address that comment about money with the... I don't know where it's gone. Someone said they want to see money out of politics, and you're totally right. I mean, I think that's like 99% of the problem. If we just make politics entirely 100% publicly funded and you're not allowed to have private funders at all, then in my view, that would resolve a lot of the big issues, as well as tightening up some of our lobbying laws. But, these are, I've often thought it would be cool to have a political party that was 100% focused just on that foundational stuff, getting money out of politics, getting lobbying in line, just the fundamental, like a true democracy party. Because I think, on the whole, most people agree with quite progressive policies. On the whole, people want people to be able to access healthcare, to have a roof over their heads, and to have food for their kids. Most people agree with these basic tenets, and the only reason we have more right-wing policies is because our donors and lobbyists skew their policies towards their interests. So yeah, I think if we were to make our to make our politics genuinely democratic, would resolve a lot of our issues. Papa, are you done with comments?
We're done with comments for now. For now.
So that was the Employment Relations Act. Another thing that happened this week is the government released their redress scheme for survivors of abuse in care. And kia ora to Tu Chapman. I don't know if you're still here, but I saw you in the comments earlier. Thank you so much for your amazing advocacy, and for everyone else who has been speaking out and doing mahi in this space, because it is not easy to be fighting for justice for something that the government just recently apologized for the abuse that the state inflicted on victims of state, I don't even want to call it care, but people who were abducted by the state and then abused by the state, and faith-based organizations, right? It must be so difficult to have experienced that, or to know people who have experienced that, and then to see the government continue the pathway that is traumatizing people that are currently in state. What's another word instead of care? Just
abuse.
like,
Yeah, it's sad. It's a hard
being held by the state.
It's a hard topic to talk about, just because we want to avoid calling it state care, because that's the opposite of what it is. Absolutely, yeah, but.
Yeah, so the continuation of abuse of kids being held by the state, and also because of the minimization of the harm that's been caused in the past, the way that repercussions of those harms, such as gangs, continue to be demonized without that context, and so on and so forth. So recently, the government made a decision in regards to a redress scheme for survivors of abuse by the state, and this comes after the Royal Commission inquiry. Years long inquiry. So many people poured their hearts and souls to tell their stories for this inquiry. People who were re-traumatized, people who had to relive the horrors, people who I watched a story recently about people who even receiving the records from the so-called care provider, and it just showed all the torture that they went through. Stories about providers who deleted all of that evidence so they didn't have to provide it to the Royal Commission. People are even taking current ministers to the United Nations for being complicit in these crimes. There is actually someone who currently works in ACC that has previously overseen these crimes. So we really are talking about current ongoing issues, right? And so the royal inquiry into abuse by the state made a whole bunch of recommendations, and the government all but ignored them. And I just want to play a little bit of Maria Meno Kapakingi's speech in the House, and then I'll get into some of the specifics.
I want to mihi to Willow for actually raising it in this way, Madam Speaker.
Yes, so Willow Jean Prime opened an urgent debate in government so that they can talk about the government's redress scheme. So that's what she's thanking her for.
Kia ora, Willow.
To bring this to another opportunity to call to change the minds of government, to go from your head to your heart and understand what this means for family and whānau.
Tēnā koe.
This government has offered band-aids for bullet wounds, and the minister should be ashamed, deeply ashamed, just as every other complicit member of parliament in the coalition government should be too, because to reject the findings, and let me just say that again, to reject the findings of the commission is to reject the truth. Te Pāti Māori remains unwavering, Madam Speaker, in this commitment to justice. We will continue to fight this, we will continue to name it, and we will continue to reject it and to say the names and the voices, bring the voices of our whānau to the House. Good intentions, and I heard that phrase earlier too, good intentions is simply not enough. It is the road to future harm and hell, and that we stand as Pāti Māori and reject the ongoing position and the ongoing harm and abuse in care. Madam Speaker, tēnā.
Abuse in care.
And by the way, we have just recently had a report about children in Aotearoa facing the highest suicide rate in the OECD, still facing issues and abuse within Oranga Tamariki. So really, we are talking about ongoing abuse, right? Now, what is this redress that the government came up with? It was so incredibly insulting to survivors. It's hard to put into words just how insulting it is to survivors. First and foremost, faith-based institutions, victims of faith-based institutions were excluded from the redress scheme. They say that they still need a lot of time to think about it. It's coming. But what Erica Stanford said is that if they had included it in there, it would have taken years. So that's kind of signaling that this could take years to come. These are people who have already been fighting for years and years Many of the survivors have even died. So the urgency of the situation cannot be overstated. And that's what we're dealing with at the moment. But still, they left out a whole chunk of these survivors. Okay. For the people who were included, what did they offer? An increase from $19,000 as an average payment for redress to $30,000. That is as a total ihoma. So if you experienced abuse, torture, suffering at the hands of the state for your entire life, that if it's ruined your life, it's sent you on a pathway of trauma, maybe gang life, maybe drugs, maybe further violence, or just good old depression and anxiety.
And suicide.
This all you get, 30,000. You can't even live off of 30,000 for 1 year in New Zealand in this day and age. So they're giving you enough money for less than a year to live on for
some money for a good time.
Destroying your life. An absolute insult to survivors. Another main thing, I mean, they ignored the vast majority of recommendations. You know, it would be great to maybe we'll interview someone like Tu Chapman in a future episode to talk about these things. If they have time, or anyone who does have time who's an expert on the space, because this really is an issue that's close to my heart. A lot of the problems we're seeing in society today are directly linked to the abuse in state and faith-based institutions. And one of the main recommendations that survivors asked for, because this amazing inquiry into abuse in state and faith-based institutions was done by survivors themselves. Like, a lot of the work was done by survivors themselves. So much work, even artwork, so much incredible work went into it. And one of the things that they asked for is that they would create the redress system themselves. So it would be a survivor-led redress system. The survivors would decide how the redress would look like, how much money it would be, what would make the apology that the government made actually meaningful. And the government ignored that. They're maintaining their current redress scheme. And that seems to be the underlying issue. Survivors don't like the current scheme. Survivors find it just increasingly traumatizing and not reflective of their interests. And they've decided to continue that system and just add an extra 10 grand that people can access on top of their 19 grand. So really, survivors are not happy with this. I'm not happy with this. This is a slap in the face, and it totally goes against their apology. You know, they pretended to give this wholehearted apology of the horrors of the past. Meanwhile, they don't want to pay up for it. Remember, all of this, by the way, pay package that they're giving of approximately $30,000 each is less than $1 billion. Remember that they're giving $12 billion to the military in just one go, just like that. One budget, signing the paper, $12 billion to the military. And yet, when it comes to people who have faced historic abuse and torture by the state, they can't even get up to $1 billion. It's just, it's ridiculous. What, $3 billion to landlords it was? But when it comes to justice and repaying the harms of the past, the state doesn't have money to do it. And of course, you know, someone could do the economics calculation and tell you that, you know, not caring for survivors is actually costing the country even more money. I don't care for arguments like that, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. We should be doing what's just and what's right. But of course, it's true. If you don't help people with their health care, which is basically what this is, it's just going to turn into another cost for the system, whether it's in hospitals, whether it's in crimes, whether it's in the suffering that families go through. The cost remains. So, yeah, I mean, this went this week, and it was something that they were able to more or less avoid talking about. Ka pai. should we get into talking about the Pāti Māori's punishment?
All right, is that what we're up to now? Is that we're done
Yes.
for our Parliament Unpacked segment?
Well, it's kind of part of it.
All right, well, where are we at? What is this video? Why are we looking at Jerry Brownlee right now?
Because he offers the report of the Privileged Committee, and I think he says something somewhat interesting. See what you all think of this.
In this report, the committee's recommendation is that 3 members be punished for contempt. In each case, the recommended punishment is that the member be suspended from the service of the House, one for a period of 7 days and the other 2 for a period of 21 days. It might be interesting for some of the media who have reported to understand that it's a recommendation at this point, as the House hasn't yet dealt with it. These punishments recommended by the committee are very severe and are unprecedented in this Parliament. As far as I'm aware, since the House first met in 1854, no member who's been found guilty of contempt has been suspended for more than 3 days. I'm also conscious that, unlike in previous such cases, suspension from the service of the House now carries a substantial financial penalty. The committee's recommendation, therefore, represents a significant development in the practice of the House. A proper opportunity for debate must be provided before the House arrives at a decision. I also note that the committee's recommendation was adopted by a narrow majority. That is an important point, when the effect of the recommendation would be to deprive members of a minority party of their ability to sit and vote in this House for several days. As the committee's report states, the Speaker has a duty to protect the rights of members of all sides of the House. In particular, there's a long-standing convention for speakers to safeguard the fair treatment of the minority. I intend to honour that convention by ensuring the House does not take a decision next week without due consideration.
Okay, so he's either all talk at the moment and he just wants the debate in the House to go on before they carry out the recommendations, or reading between the lines, it sort of seems like National and ACT and New Zealand First were never intending to carry out this harsh penalty, but just wanted to put it out there as a threatening thing so that the middle ground that is reached through the debate is still super harsh. So it might just be the extreme of what they want. And so Jerry Brownlee coming out saying, oh, yes, I have to protect minorities. It's in the Speaker's rulings. Could be signaling that they're open to reducing that. In my view, kind of sounds like that anyway. But we are expecting the worst, which is that Rawiri and Debbie will be suspended for 21 days. This is the people in the Privileges Committee. So everyone in National, ACT and New Zealand First voted for. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Oh, it's predetermined,
very
right?
close,
it's ridiculous.
Though. And you've got 1 Green, 2 Māori Party, 3 Labour, 4 Labour. So for all 4 of those voted against this recommendation. So super close. And as he said, tyranny of the majority in these situations. And I'm really, thank you, Jerry, for acknowledging it. And I hope that he lives up to his own words.
It's ridiculous.
Debate.
It should be an independent panel who makes these types of judgments. Like the fact that it's just the National Party and the ACT Party.
I know.
They're just voting with their coalitions. Like,
shouldn't be so politicized, right?
Should be a kind of conscience vote, you know. They shouldn't be just voting with their party lines. Like, it'd be nice to see other Privilege Committee rulings and to see if they've always done that and just voted via party lines, because I think that would be real grounds for overhauling that whole thing.
Someone asked Jerry for that. It may have been Labour, it may have been Kieran. Someone tell me in the comments if you know. Someone asked Jerry Brownlee if he would consider allowing it to be a conscience vote when they do start the debate on Tuesday, and he said no.
Of the whole House.
So will be a party vote. And yeah, that just seems incredibly unfair. Not just, you know, the Privileges Committee shouldn't even be made up by the current government. It seems like it should be just individual, independent members who have to abide by the rules. But
absolutely. And like Rawiri and Debbie said in their interview on The Hui, they said that this has become a personal thing for Judith Collins.
Yeah, that was interesting.
And you can understand how it would be. And for someone like Winston Peters to be on that committee, of course it's going to be a kind of ideological or personal thing for someone like him. Just seems totally inappropriate, the way that they've run this whole privileges committee. And it's making me understand more and more why Te Pāti Māori wanted to run their own hearing on this kind of thing.
Yes. Thank you, Kiwi Rob, who says it was Kieran.
Ah, see, he helps. He helps. He's not just here to distract.
Nah, Kiwi Rob is legit. Like, there's a few helpful comments on there. Even Te Pāti Māori getting punished for 3 days, they will still miss the budget, Kiwi Rob says. And yeah, that's concerning. Them not getting the vote as part of it just seems so incredibly undemocratic to me. Did you want to say something?
Oh, just, yeah, they're going to miss potentially the budget, regulatory standards bill. Yeah, it's a real shame that they're not going to be there. And if we had a normal functioning government where people didn't just vote on party lines, where we thought, oh, losing their votes in terms of if things are going to be voted in or not, because of how we currently run, it's inconsequential, the fact that they're not going to be there to give their votes, because we already know how the votes are going to fall everywhere. So, like for me, I don't really understand why Rawiri and Debbie are as sad as they are at the moment. I'm hella proud of them, and I think their electorates would be proud of them as well. I can understand them feeling the mamai, feeling the hurt for their electorate members. Some of their electorate members might be saying, oh, we're upset now that we don't have a voice. We don't have Y'all in there to represent us while these important kaupapa are coming up in the House. But everything seems predetermined. Literally everything seems predetermined. So I'm not upset in terms of their voice not being present in the House during this time of suspension. I hope they're doing okay. To Debbie and to Rawiri, to Te Pāti Māori, all of the supporters and everyone else who is feeling that mamai at the moment over this whole thing. Ka nui te mihi kia koutou. Ka nui te aroha kia koutou. But I am just incredibly proud, and every time we think about the haka and the energy that has reverberated, not just here in Aotearoa, but across the globe because of that haka. And, and Rawiri and Debbie in this interview with Julian Wilcox, he's got the eyebrow thing, Julian, yeah, I'm just incredibly proud of them. And they said that they would do this again if the opportunity came up. And I hope that they do. I think they've got nothing to be sorry for. And I think the fact that their voice isn't going to be there is okay, because everything is predetermined. And yeah, in a heartbeat, they should do it again, because I think it's motivated a lot of us to take notice and to see Indigenous peoples all over the world who have been inspired and encouraged by the haka. It's a reminder that the kinds of things that Te Pāti Māori do in government, like they may not be able to be consequential in terms of the votes and what legislation is going to go forward or what is going to be blocked. But because of the kōrero that they bring to the table, because of the strength that they have in the House, the strong kōrero that they put across, and because of things like the haka, showing not just our strength, our kaha, but as well our beauty in our culture. The young women, even Pākehā, but the young women who have spoken and saying, it's been so beautiful and lovely and amazing seeing Hana in that incredible position of strength, leading that haka, and some people often think, is that a okay thing for wahine to do, to lead a haka like that, and so it's one of our most famous haka, Kamate, and she led it beautifully. And that's going to be an inspiration for everyone, not just for Māori, but for young wahine all over not just over the country, but all over the world. And that's something that I just think is incredibly important. And I just disagree completely with some of the criticism that has been coming out from people saying, oh, you know, what have they got across the line? They're just doing haka. What have they actually been able to achieve? And for me, they've been able to achieve a hell of a lot. The rebuilding of Te Pāti Māori after they lost their voter base, after they went into coalition with National, they have had to rebuild themselves a lot. And, you know, it's like during this current term, what has Labour been able to get across the line? You know, like, why are we criticizing one of like, the smallest political party who is in opposition currently? Why are we criticizing them and judging them on what they've been unable to get across the line? I think they've done an incredible job in terms of putting their positions out there with what little, they've got no political leverage. So the fact that they've been able to be as impactful as they have in terms of inspiring the rest of us, I take my hat off.
Mm-hmm.
Well done, Raudi. Well done, Debbie.
Kia ora, I agree. So on this, the coverage of it, I wanted to talk just quickly about this stuff article written by Lloyd Burr, and it was so hilariously wrong.
What is this? What is wrong with Lloyd?
So wrong. We got them to correct some of it, but it remains wrong. So this is the original manifestation of the Lloyd Burr article. It said, instead of saying how many votes opposed to Pāti Māori, Maipi Clarke, spelt wrong by the way, it's spelled Clarke, another mistake, started a rendition of the kamate. I don't know who writes kamate as one word like that. It's kamate. Ripping pages of the bill in half and chucking them towards the Axe Party, which sits just mere meters away. Oh, the violence! The violence! Anyway, we ended up heading... Yes.
Real risk.
The real risk of paper cuts. Oh, those cutty papers. Okay, so we ended up getting in touch with Stuff, told them that it was wrong, them saying that instead of saying how many votes opposed to Pāti Māori, she started a rendition of kamate, because actually she started by saying, what was it? E ono
ngā poti e whakahe.
E ono ngā poti e whakahe. And I even attached a video for them.
F6. E ono ngā poti, F6 votes opposed.
And they were the last ones.
Okay, so yes, so that is a good point, because a lot of these articles and the Privileges Committee said that they interrupted the votes, but in fact they were the last party to vote. All the other votes had been put in, and she gave to Pāti Māori's vote. So in fact the haka was part of Te Pāti Māori's speech in opposition against the bill. That's how it should have been seen at the time.
Can you hand me that book over there? I just want to try something. It's just because it is really true, eh? Just that rip from Hannah was just outrageous. Hey,
it was a number of papers too, not just one.
It was a number of. Maybe it helps if you've got.
Maybe you should try numerous papers to be.
If you've got lots of papers, it's like a bit easier. But like just to rip it,
yeah,
I'm gonna give it
in the camera.
I'm gonna give it a go. I want to try and rip this perfectly all the way down the middle.
Raise it up. We want to see.
Kawana.
No, I have to see it in the camera.
Yeah, I'm gonna. Ka whakamanu whiritia koe e au. Oh, kamate. Okay, pretty straight line, but Hannah's one is like dead perfectly, 100% down the paper. It's amazing. It's amazing. People say they're not doing anything. I mean, just look at this paper ripping. Anyway, sorry to derail.
All right, thank you for that, Pere. So anyway, we hit them up.
Pere's boy boss moment. Yeah, thank you, Kiwi Bird.
And someone, Paul, thank you, Paul, emailed Stuff and got a response back from them. Thank you for your feedback. Please note that our article from last night wasn't a blow-by-blow account of everything that Maipi Clarke said in the House today. Who calls it blow-by-blow? I mean, everything that Pāti Māori does is violence, right?
It's just like, the media is just like, oh, sorry, we weren't trying to tell the exact truth of what's going on.
Yeah, but it's actually interesting what they say, because they say the story was focused on the Parliament Privileges Committee finding and therefore was a brief summary of what took place. But if you look
Don't lie.
at the Parliament Committee's findings, this is from the Privileges Committee's findings, description of the events, and look how they describe it. Te Pāti Māori was invited to cast its vote, and Hana Rafiti Maipi Clark casts 6 votes opposed. Maipi Clark immediately proceeded to perform a haka. Okay, so
there you go. There's your summary.
The summary is in the description they talk about. But anyway, they changed it to, instead of just saying how many votes opposed to Pāti Māori had, Maipi Clark, still spelt wrong in the new article edit, added, so another mistake, added, a rendition of the kamate, written wrong again, ripping pages of the bill in half and chucking them towards Te Pāti Māori.
Towards the Axe Party. How did you read
sorry,
that?
towards the Axe Party, which sits just mere meters away.
Kapai.
And one other thing on their thing is that someone else pointed out. It prompted Waititi and Ngārewa Paka to join in, and it became a full-blown haka. Just not a full-blown.
It was a whole porphyry.
It was a whole thing. It was so scary. Okay, so anyways, we had a little win. We got stuff to change that article, but mostly I wanted to show it because of just how hilariously wrong it is and how it remains wrong. Like Lloyd Burr, to be honest, it kind of felt like it was an article written by AI. So
it feels.
Was it Lloyd Burr or was it AI?
It feels like one of those articles they've just riddled with mistakes to farm people's engagement of us saying, hey, you got this wrong. Hey, you got this wrong. Can you change this? Can you change? Because it's just a ridiculous amount of inaccuracies across the whole article. And Lloyd Burr has been in the game for a long time. A long time. He's like a veteran political commentator at this point. So,
not chucking the paper just meters away from Axe. Oh my goodness. How could you, Hannah? You know, this is what we're talking about. These violent Indigenous folks. They're so extreme and scary and gonna start a war, blah, blah, blah. Kapai. So, anything else you wanted to say on the suspension?
Oh, in terms of the Parliament Unpacked section of that?
No, just in terms of the suspension in general.
Well,
but you had those things.
Just for people, for those of you who don't know, this is, that's not helping. 21 days for Rawiri and Debbie. 7 days for Hana. And this is off the back of the Treaty Principles Bill, all of the attacks against Te Iwi Māori. The hikoi wasn't just about the Treaty Principles Bill, right? All of our grievances. On the hikoi, we came with all of our grievances, generations of grievances. The Crown has been breaching Te Tiriti since it was signed, and that energy came along with everyone on the hikoi, and the haka that Te Pāti Māori displayed in the house, that they delivered in the house, carried all of our energy, and it was a beautiful thing. Like I said, reverberated across the world for Indigenous peoples across the world. And in those moments, I felt seen. And I felt that the beehive, that parliamentary house was able to feel our frustration. And and Te Iwi Māori, I like to say that we are a people of protest. We don't always engage in the colonial avenues of engagement that this Westminster system provides to us, but we will get out and we will protest. We will hikoi, we will march, we will chant, we will haka, and that's how we have felt. That's how we express ourselves, and that's for me, I felt seen, and it was a beautiful thing. And then to see this unprecedented punishment, it's a scary thing. It's a scary thing. So the biggest suspension before this apparently was just 3 days, and so now we're seeing 21 days each for Rawiri and Debbie. So kia kaha Te Pāti Māori. You're doing fine. Keep it up. Oh, and a lovely sign of solidarity came from West Papua. And a lot of people don't know what's going on in West Papua. Me being one of them, to be honest, I'm very fresh in the space of understanding what's going on in West Papua. And so this letter, I thought I'd bring it up and read it out, because not only is it nice to see the solidarity that Te Pāti Māori gets, but it's also a time for us to learn about what's going on in West Papua as well. So, as West Papuans, we have often found our traditions under attack by an occupying regime hell-bent on wiping out our culture. As Indonesia invaded in the 1960s, they burned our flags and tribal artifacts in giant bonfires. Later in the 1970s and 80s, they killed tens of thousands in a genocidal attempt to destroy our kotekas, penis goods, the cornerstone of Papuan traditional dress. Today, today, West Papuans are still regularly executed for wearing dreadlocks, like Tuju Wanda, killed by Indonesian soldiers in November 2024. Our customs are mocked and denigrated, and we are called monkeys for continuing in the traditions of our ancestors. In the Lani tribe I come from, we perform the Nadawi Wenendigure. Aroha mai, meaning warrior's song of spirit, a tribal dance very similar to the haka. It comes from our ancestors, and we know what it means to protect. Therefore, we have nothing but solidarity with our indigenous Māori brothers and sisters as they fight to preserve their rights. Our struggles to protect Pacific indigeneity and against colonialism and climate change are all interconnected. From across the Pacific, we stand with you. Kia kaha, Benny Wenda, the interim president, United Liberation Movement for West Papua. So, like I said, right, it reverberated across the world, not just for us here, not just for our Pacific brothers and sisters and Indonesian brothers and sisters, but really throughout the entire world. So kia kaha, Pāti Māori, and kia kaha to all of our people who are learning these taonga tuku iho, our haka, our waiata karakia, our kōrero tuku iho, all of these beautiful taonga that our tupuna have left for us. Never, when I was younger, never did I realize that our beautiful cultural sacred practices would be used in these ways to resist in this way against colonization. And like what we've learnt from the Palestinians, you know, just practicing the culture. This is what I hear from a lot of Palestinian groups. Just practicing your culture, just living in your culture, just not letting those colonial criminals to oppress you and to silence your culture and to erase your culture. You know, we have to show that their methods aren't getting to us, that we're still here, we're still going to practice our culture, we're not going to forget where we've come from, and we're not going to forget exactly what they're trying to erase. We have to continue practicing our cultures, because that's what they want. They want us to forget who we are.
Yes.
Yeah.
Complete the process of colonization. You reminded me, Pere, in terms of solidarity, and people who are already struggling under such horrific oppression, like in that statement you just read from the West Papua resistance. And Toitu Te Tiriti posted this video from Gaza. Gaza in support of Toitu Te Tiriti.
Cute.
So,
and while we're there as well, you want to say something?
Oh, just, you know, that quote that, you know, possibly the quote that resonates the most for me in terms of this genocide, which is that all colonized people see themselves in Palestinians and all colonizers see themselves in Israelis. That's why the people who support colonization and racism against Māori support Israel. And that's why you see people like Te Pāti Māori, like Toitu Te Tiriti, supporting the Palestinian people. I think what's happening in Palestine has just made it black and white in terms of the clarity of the difference between Indigenous and the colonizer. And it has made those alliances extremely clear around the world as well. So yeah, it's been really humbling. Someone else said that Te Pāti Māori got love from Kalahui, Hawaii too. So yeah, there is Indigenous people around the world showing their solidarity to Te Pāti Māori, and I just find it so incredibly beautiful because yeah, that haka really, it reached the whole world. It was really an inspiring moment for all of us who, you know, not only identify as Indigenous people, but who see ourselves in the struggle of Indigenous people and who wish to change the colonial mindset of the land. So, yeah.
And as well, just, you know, it's the real clown show, right? What's going on in the Beehive. That whole place is a circus. And so to just see some energy, you know, it's the kind of space, all of this legislation going through, you just want to shake them. You know, you just really want to shake them. And so I think that energy being brought in there is just such a powerful thing. And to see it reverberate like this and have real impact away from, you know, what would normally require you to have impact in the House, which is seats and votes. You know, it's not playing by their rules, you know, and this is exactly why Te Pāti Māori have been punished in the way that they have, because they have been able to develop some type of power, some type of something that is having somewhat of an influence. And of course, the system wants to control all of us and not allow for any of that kind of individual power building on that kind of level. So, well done, Te Pāti Māori, well done. Come on.
Oh, there's a protest on the 20th of May to protest against the government. It's on the day that the debate starts. So the debate around the punishment that Te Pāti Māori receives, which, oh Lord, it's going to be painful. It's going to be painful. No, we've got to be strong, But yeah, we're going to have the likes of Shane Jones and Winston Peters standing up and shaking their finger at the lack of civility and how this government is turned into a clown show when, of course, they are the biggest clowns in the show. You know, I didn't put it in my Parliament Unpacked because honestly, I thought y'all would get sick of it. But Shane Jones and Winston Peters and David Seymour numerous times interrupted Parliament this week. You know, when people stand up to speak, and Winston Peters stood up with his, you know, in response to a question that is unrelated to the Greens budget, but nonetheless, he took the opportunity to stand up with the Greens budget, which he reprinted, except he added the communist logo on it, the patua and sickle. And yeah, he just like used the question time as an opportunity to attack the Greens, which is actually against the rules of the House. And he was called out by it by Jerry Brownlee, who told him it was against the rules of the House. But that's just what they do week in, week out. They just go against the rules of the House.
Well,
and so
they stretch it some, you know, like...
It is hilarious watching them talking about rules. Oh, boy. What's in the comments?
Oh, no. I just thought people might like to see it just while we're having a little bit of a yarn.
Kapai.
Time
So
to move
Tuesday protest, I'm not sure what time. But we plan on making a wee little... Mimi.
Yeah, hopefully
on
just
our page.
If you are in Pōneke, if you're able to be available on the 20th of May, hopefully Toitu puts out some more comms in terms of what's expected of people on the day. We are definitely expecting to see more information come out, and if more information does come out, we will definitely update our socials. We'll put it in our stories. But yeah, definitely hope we see some more information.
Ka pai. Before we get into the pay equity kōrero, were you going to talk about the regulatory standards bill?
Regulatory standards bill.
The tribunal.
I was.
Yeah, it's coming up. But did you want me to go? Are we jumping to pay equity?
Let's do pay equity. We'll do pay equity. Talk a little bit about the Waitangi Tribunal, and then we'll end it with the regulatory standards bill.
All right, ka pai. So I'm not going to spend too long on this because I'm sure all of you are very bored of this topic. But basically, long story short, Andrea Vance, a writer for The Post who has previously written against the Greens for being outspoken on the genocide. She's also criticized the Greens for having alternatives to policing. And so this genocide supporter, she drew the line at pay inequity for women, right? Because mass killing of women in Gaza is not a problem. But Andrea Vance was really upset about the pay inequity thing, which would have been fine and I wouldn't have thought twice of it. But she decided to do it in an exceptionally rude way. She decided to use sexist language, which, call me an old school feminist, but I don't get how making a feminist point using sexist language is a good idea. I just don't get it. And the article was the girl math budget that will cut deep, especially for women. Why is it the girl math budget? I don't get it. There's obviously some kind of satire, irony going on here that's just beyond my level of intelligence. And I just do not understand. But the whole article is just riddled with sexist language like that. Most of all, the thing that really rattled everyone was her, I've lost it now.
What do you want? I'll find
The
it.
C-word comments.
Oh, I saw it just up there.
Yeah, it was highlighted. We were prepared.
There we are.
Oh, yeah, here we go. So, using girl math, she also called it a girl squad, a whole bunch of stuff, right, blah, blah, blah. And then she said, turns out you can have it all so long as you're prepared to be a C to the woman who birthed your kids. School your offspring and wipe the ass of your elderly parents while you stand on the shoulders to earn your six-figure taxpayer-funded packet. Mostly, I love the general...
Yeah, we like a bit of sassiness, you know? We like some hard truths and some just...
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so true that they are receiving really good, well-paying salaries as they're shitting on women, right? So...
Can I jump in just for a second? I just want to say someone's comments that they put in there. Paula Marie McKenzie said, yeah, it was rude, but it was accurate. We think it was accurate. Hey.
I mean...
For us, the issue, and we'll get to it, but for us, the issue was how Labour used this article. Perhaps, Andrea Vance, not the words that we would have used. And like you say, it's not a good way to make your point around sexism to use sexist language.
It's just not a good idea. I mean, because look, she's trying to go up to someone and be like, you're being sexist, you cunt. It's just not a good idea for an argument, right? To reinforce the sexism, to use sexism to prove that the other side is being sexist. To call someone a bigoted racist name to prove that they're racist. It's just argumentation 101. It's not a good argument. And as soon as I read that article, I thought, oh, great. I bet this entire debate is now going to become about this article simply because of 2 or 3 words that Andrea Vance used. Meanwhile, we have a whole ton of experts, unionists, healthcare workers, other people who are impacted by this decision that have come out and made their point without using these personal attacks, right? So it's not like Andrea Vance was the only one to speak out against this, but she did it in a way that was clearly going to be viewed as unacceptable by some in National and their supporters, right? So yes, as soon as I saw it, I was like, this article risks distracting the kōrero. I had no idea how bad it was going to get, E Te Whānau. I had no idea. So watching Parliament TV, and then I see Jan Tinetti, and she quotes a section of this article. Not the section where she calls her a C-word or anything like that.
It's
It was
not
about...
that bad, but...
She quotes the comment about being backhanding other women. A united and a historic act of economic backhanding of other women. So just a generic quote. Something they could have used from anywhere, right? As soon as Jan Tinetti used it, what ensued was like a half an hour response from the current government. how dare you use an article that used sexist language? You're the ones that are sexist. And all of a sudden it became about National Act in New Zealand First accusing Labour of being sexist after what they just did to women. It was the most ridiculous thing you've ever seen. And I just thought, why did Labour give that to them? Because, as well, further context, National had already been complaining about this article all over Twitter. They'd been crying about this article. They've been going on about how sexist it is, da-da-da-da. So Labour could have foreseen, if we use this article in the House, it's going to backfire. That National are going to use it to play victim. And that is exactly what happened. Brooke Van Velden stood up and gave this massive speech about how no one... It's so ironic, you guys. She stood up, Brooke Van Velden, and said that no woman in the country should face sex-based discrimination. After what they just did.
Yeah.
They were able to flip it fully.
Yeah.
It was ridiculous. It was so painful to watch. And then, so, you know, I tweeted about it and I was like, Labour, you just totally fell into the trap for National. But I had no idea at that time that it was going to be the first story on 6 p.m. news. My goodness. The first story. Let's just watch a little bit of it, okay? Let's just watch a little bit of it.
Tonight on One News, the air turns blue in Parliament as Brooke Van Velden drops the C-bomb amid defence of female ministers over pay equity.
No woman in this parliament, nor in this country, should be subjected to sex-based discrimination.
Got to be kidding me!
More attacks as risk of Gaza famine grows. The United Nations accuses Israel of weaponising food.
Not just die because of the bombardment, but they will die because of the lack of food.
And schools in. The push to get more Kiwi
I
kids.
actually wanted to show that.
Velden even had veteran politician Winston Peters holding his head, later saying Parliament had hit a new low.
Politician.
The outburst came during fierce debate over a media column strongly criticising pay equity changes. Political editor Mikey Sherman has more.
It's not every day you hear the C word in Parliament.
References to girl math and
the minister using the bold language to make a bold stand.
I do not agree with the clearly gendered and patronising language that Andrea Vance used to reduce senior cabinet ministers to girl bosses, hype squads.
Andrea Vance is the National Affairs Editor for media outlet The Post. A former political reporter, she penned a scathing critique of the recent pay equity changes. Mentioning this scene of female ministers standing side by side to front the issue, Vance wrote, 6 girl bosses, Willis, her hype squad, all united in a historic act of economic backhanding other women. With billions saved in pay equity, Vance took aim at the ministers, writing, turns out you can have it all so long as you're prepared to be a...
Say it.
So, you know, obviously she's trying to make some ironic point about the current female ministers being false feminists. But it just didn't come together for me. Like, it just didn't make sense, like her using the word girl bosses to imply that they're fake feminists. I don't get why her using sexist language made that point. I just didn't get it. Again, maybe I'm just not good at reading satire and irony, but for me, it read like it would for a lot of National Party supporters, which was that she was just using sexist language. And it undermined the very valid argument, which was that National was in fact being sexist. They were in fact hurting women. And so it was the first thing on the 6 p.m. news, and actually Mikey Sherman... I'm not sure.
It's a very curious feminist moment when a former Minister for Women repeats parts of a clearly misogynistic article in this House.
We should have robust political argument, but that never requires us to make misogynistic or personal attacks.
Draw the line there.
That sort of standard language, nothing is anything else than that, is it?
Obviously the point needs to be made that colonizers make more of a thing of words, of actions, like the haka. Yes, we know this firsthand from, you know, what happened with Casey Costello, but also we've experienced that previously. We had an animal rights march, was it in 2020? 2009, 2020,
We've
yeah.
done a couple of them.
No, I know, it was warm 2020. And the Wellington Animal Rights March 2020, that's what WARM stands for. And at the time, it was the biggest march that we've had in Wellington for the animal rights, kaupapa. And the thing that the news all decided to focus on was the fact that one person out of at least 500 people march held a sign which said, "Eat pussy, not animals."
That's a great phrase.
Not a sexist phrase. It just says, you know, it's better to eat pussy than animals in this person's view, whether you disagree or not. Kei a koe. But this was that person's, it was like a make love, not war sign. It was a play on that, right? Anyway, so News Talk ZB was one of the main people they interviewed at the time. They attacked this. They said, oh, it was so sexist. And actually, who was it? Oh no, why does the name Fitzsimmons? I might be making this up, you all.
Don't make stuff up.
But who was the Wellington mayor?
Oh, it was what's his name? It was what's his name who kind of semi-supported the Maru Kaikuru occupation. He's now in New Zealand.
I thought there was a woman.
He's now a New Zealand First MP, Andy Costa. No.
Andy Costa. I thought it was a woman.
Andy Costa.
I thought there was a woman at the time in Wellington, and she criticized. Anyway. Anyway, so we've experienced this before, and we're not the only ones. Often they do this to protesters, right?
It's common sense. It's common sense. Don't use stupid language that gives the opposition a free pass.
Yes.
Like, Kai Matara brought it up in the comments. They said, oh, well, you know, if it wasn't for the Andrea Vance article, they would have found some other way to distract from the kaupapa. But don't hand it to them on a silver platter. You know what I mean? Don't hand it to them. It's just making their job way too easy. Come on, like, the quote that they used from that article, like you said, could have been taken from anywhere. In fact, they didn't even need to take a quote. They could have just themselves provided a little bit of kōrero. But I mean, we have to be incredibly diligent in terms of.
Yes, we don't want to be victim blaming, right?
No, of course not. But you know, giving the opposition ammunition.
But that's the thing. It wasn't the victims. The women who were impacted by this pay inequity thing, they didn't use this language. The women in the unions, they didn't use this language. It was a random, untrustworthy, I must add, writer, Andrea Vance, who's not even on our side, who's pro-genocide, anti-Greens, giving, you know, what looks like a trap. Looks like a trap because that article used, you know, explicitly like the worst language you could possibly use. And for, you know, Jan Tinetti cornered herself into using that article and then being asked by One News, why did you use an article that used the C word? And this is what she had to say.
Actually, that's a word that I would never choose to use. I can't even say that word.
And yet Labour asked multiple questions in the House quoting the article.
I deliberately chose a quote that part of that wasn't misogynistic, so it didn't talk about girl math in there.
It was hard to...
So she admitting that there are other parts of the article that were misogynistic. Such a clear on goal, Labour.
Yeah, it's
such a clear on goal.
If you've made that judgment that, oh, there's misogyny in that article, that's when you move on and you find a new article. Like, that is normally what they would do.
Just quote an expert, Labour. Just quote a respectable. Just give a statistic. Just quote Fleur Fitz. Quote literally anyone. Except for the one article that triggered the hell out of National. Anyway, so Brooke used it to give this emotional... sorry, should not use that word. Just to give this speech and talk about being a powerful woman. And they used this as a, you know, as a stick against Labour and against the attacks. They've just flipped the table entirely. And then...
And I'll just do a shout out. DIY Guru has said it a couple times, and I completely agree. Emily Wrights has written a really good piece on this, and she was one of the first people that I saw who called it out. As soon as she saw Andrea Vance's article using that language, Emily called it out. She knew that the whole kōrero, the whole kaupapa was going to be derailed, and that was going to become the focus. And it's like, yeah, it might become the focus in terms of like the commentary space.
But Labour didn't need to feed into it.
But then Labour decided to put it into the beehive, which is just...
Yeah, so as soon as Labour asked that question, you can imagine they all had a field day. Winston Peters stood up. David Seymour stood up. They all stood up. Oh, how could you? Anyway, and as others have pointed out, Chippy has ended up backtracking as bloody usual. And someone said it, it's even worse that he ended up. I low-key agree with that.
The capitulation?
The way that Labour capitulates every time is so weak.
I mean, play the
It's
clip,
so
then
weak.
I'll give my opinion.
All over again, wait longer for pay increases, which frankly they should already be getting because they're already being discriminated against because of their gender. I think we need to get back to that issue now rather than the other things. Insofar as our quoting from a rather controversial comment yesterday meant that the Labour Party was contributing to the distractions around that, I think we will own that. It would have been better if we had quoted from something else rather than from that particular column. I'm going to leave it, as I did yesterday, I'll leave it up to the newspaper itself to defend the particular column. I think us quoting from it contributed to a distraction that took the issue away from where it needs to be, which is the plight of low-paid women who are simply asking to be paid fairly.
Usually, though, I have to say, I do like it when people own up to obvious mistakes, though. I find it endearing.
Yeah, I mean, this is why, Chris Luxon got all of that hate thrown at him after that Mike Hoskins interview when he simply could not say that he would fire, I forget the guy, but there was that guy in National Party, bit of misconduct on his part, misconduct enough for him to step down. Luxon should have fired him and should have been very clear of that, and he couldn't do it. He couldn't bring himself to say that he deserved to be fired and that he would have fired him. I agree with you. Labour shouldn't capitulate on the level that they do. Every time, well, often I'll say, not every time, but what's going on?
Whoa, sorry.
But they capitulate way too much. That's true. But this was a straight up mistake of theirs, an amateur mistake.
To be fair, yeah.
Like a low level amateur mistake. I think there's no.
Where's the?
Okay, you let me. I will do the clicking. Okay, I will do the clicking. I'm gonna have a.
Can you put both of our faces?
I'm on like a.
See?
Roller coaster over here. Okay, I don't know how
fault.
you're not allowed to do the clicking anymore. Okay, anyway, Aroha.
Okay.
I think it's good that he took some responsibility in this case. I would love to see more strength and less capitulation in general from Labour, but when there is an obvious mistake like that.
Okay. It would have been really great if they just stopped it before it happened. Like, it would have taken this most clearest PR expert, the most clearest point a PR expert could make. Do not quote the article that used the C word and girl math and a whole bunch of sexist things. I mean, as soon as the article came out, I made a tweet and I said Andrea Vance shouldn't have used that word. And anyway, she's not really on our side. She's been against, the sanctions, the sanctions bill for Israel and so on and so forth. But but Labour saw it and thought, great article, let's quote it in the bloody House. So yes,
Can't wait, Labour. Learn your lessons, eh? Let's move on. What else have we got? Unless you've got more.
Someone says.
Unless you've got more to say about pay equity, let's move on.
Just that this debacle, it continues.
It's
it continues. So this is from a protest outside Nicola's office, right? She's from the.
I don't think people can hear you.
Oh, sorry, Aotearoa mai.
The video is very loud.
Aotearoa mai. So this, I'll mute it. So this video was filmed by Fleur Fitzsimmons, who's the National Secretary of the Public Service Association, and Union for Public Service Workers, right? And this is the video that she shot outside. Look, lots of people outside Nicola Willis's office. It should be about the protest. Good job, everyone. And then there's that sign, "Me too, you C word." Okay, no, I wouldn't have even noticed that sign, right? But then Nicola Willis comments under it. Disappointing to see you platforming the C word to describe women in leadership. I thought better of you. How far is this distraction politics going to go? Like, yes, okay, Labour played into it. But at the same hand, on the other hand, National is milking the hell out of it, playing victim. And as we said, it's normal for them to do that, to use a word, the wrong word that colonizers used, to, you know, it's the same as the haka in the house, right? The haka is intimidating. You can't resist like that. The C word is intimidating. You can't resist like that. And in this case, you know, it's not even Labour quoting it. It's literally just a random person with a sign who is caught on the video that Fleur Fitzsimmons took. It has nothing to do with Fleur. It has nothing to do with the argument being made against the scrapping regulation. But because this has been made an issue, Nicola Willis was able to bring it back to attacks on them and victimize themselves. Honestly, it just reminds me of Israel, right? Committing a genocide and then I'm a victim. Anti-Semitism commits a genocide. Anti-Semitism commits a genocide.
Yeah, and she talks all about...
Kills women. Oh, C word.
She talks all about like, hey, let's have some substance in the discussion. But she is happy to quickly run to this defense.
Exactly. They don't want to talk about the substance. They don't want to talk about the bloody substance.
Okay, kapai. Let's move on.
Are we moving on?
Unless you've got more to say.
I just want to make it clear that we aren't like protest blaming or victim blaming, especially the person with a random sign.
No, I mean,
she's not a person of the Labour Party.
Wasn't a bad sign.
That was just a criticism purely of the Labour Party for falling for an obvious trap. I don't know what Andrea Vance's... Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if Andrea Vance set that up as a deliberate trap. Hashtag conspiracy theory. But she has been very pro this government and pro oppressive policies up until now. So I wouldn't be surprised. And if it was, then oh, golly my.
It seems
Labour fell from it.
It seems really conspiratorial, but I just think Jan Tinetti should have known better. It's really strange. Surely, I mean, Labour, create some policy, right? Don't take extracts from that type of, you know, that's what's triggering our conspiratorial type of perspective on this thing. Because it's just such an incredibly amateur mistake to give the other side that kind of out. But...
Oh, yeah, and as someone is saying, Winston Peters, oh my goodness. Honestly, they are literally abusive in the house week after week.
Yep.
Yes, he called Chloe Swarbrick a groomer.
Yeah.
They stand up in the house and bully them and disrespect the rules and use
yeah, it's a circus. It's a clown show. We know.
Yeah, just the point that they are the greatest bullies in government, and for that now, not just in an interpersonal way, but like, you know, laws impact people's lives. Interpersonal attacks like the C word, they might annoy you, they might upset you on an interpersonal basis.
Yeah.
But the systemic changes that they're changing are actually changing people's lives. And that actually just this on the Te Pāti Māori suspension, it does remind me of a point.
Yep.
One thing that often comes up in the Te Pāti Māori suspension is, well, I'd never act that way in a marae.
Marae is what they usually say.
Oh, yeah, in a marae. Would you act like that in a marae? Yeah, I respect the rules of marae, says someone who's never been on one.
Yeah.
The ridiculousness of comparing Parliament to a marae. Parliament is the house that makes the governing laws that impact everyone's lives. They have the power to put people in cages. They have the power to sanction people's benefits. They have the power to give benefits or not. They have the power to take people's lands or not. They have the power over your entire life versus a marae that has no impact on your life whatsoever and is just sitting there trying to exist in its ancestral land. How can you compare the two? Like, the government house is the one that's forcing its rule upon your people, and you can barely put your voice in through that fog of dictatorial rule. On the other hand, a marae that's been oppressed all its life, that has no impact on your life, that you don't have to go to, you can just completely ignore and it will never impact you. Somehow we're equating the protocols on a marae to the government house that's occupying the land and enforcing its rule over Māori. It's just the most ridiculous argument I've ever seen, but it's the same thing with equating a word versus legislation, don't you think?
It's just like what everyone is saying, and like what you said, you know, Winston Peters, they don't have any respect for the tikanga of Parliament. You know what I mean? They're breaking the rules themselves all the time, and they're telling others to respect the rules while they themselves don't respect those rules.
Absolutely.
Marae have very clear tikanga that everyone, that most people respect. And the manner in which people carry themselves at marae, at various kaupapa that take place at marae, pōwhiri, tapu ceremonial practices, people engage in a respectful manner. In the house, it's a clown show. It is a circus. It doesn't make any sense. They don't stick by their own tikanga. They're breaking their own rules all the time. They're twisting and bending their own rules all the time. They're finding loopholes. They're lying to us. They're finding various ways to not answer very basic, very clear questions. They don't have respect for their colleagues. They don't have respect for us, members of the public. So to make that comparison, I think, is an absolute joke in and of itself. The parliamentary system, the beehive itself, it is a joke.
Oh, yeah, people are putting so many more examples in the comments, being racist towards Mexicans, saying that people who care about the genocide are frothing at the mouth about Gaza. I mean, that's so much worse.
Yeah.
than a swear word.
So if people like Winston Peters, Shane Jones, and other people started to act with a bit of decorum, with a bit of self-respect, and for respect for the parliamentary system themselves, then maybe they would be able to say these kinds of call-outs in the way that they do, but it's complete hypocrisy. And they're just trying to pretend that they have some level of respectability because, you know, they wear suits and that's the demographic that they try to appeal to. But in reality, absolute hypocrites.
And it's you know, I think Kai Matata has given a nice summary there, and that's what I said in my short reel. What it's about is erasing history, erasing indigeneity on this land, because the project of colonization is to assimilate Māori into the Western colonial culture. And the haka just showed them that they failed at that. Because, you know, not just the haka, but Hana in particular, she represents the generation that went to Kohanga Reo, that have lived their culture their entire lives. Since the day they were born, at the school that they attended, in the household, they speak Te Reo Māori. And there is an entire generation of people like that who are living their indigenous culture and practice. They have failed miserably to erase Te Ao Māori. They have failed to assimilate Māori people. Māori have been able to survive and thrive. And the comeback that Te Reo Māori, that Māori culture is making in this country, I'm literally getting goosebumps right now talking about it. Because, well, you can't see it through my jumper, but I literally am, because this is what colonizers are, you know, we're seeing in Gaza right now, we're seeing what happened here in Aotearoa 200 years ago. The attempt to just erase the indigenous people and their culture. They have been woefully unable to do that. Hana is just a shining, and Te Pāti Māori, a shining example of their failure, because the haka lives on, Te Reo Māori lives on, the Māori culture lives on, and it just drives them mad. What are they going to do? Because, like, you know, we talk about this often.
They can't stop it.
It's too late, right?
Yeah.
It's too late for the colonizers to put Māori back in the box.
I am fearful of all of our Pākehā whanaunga, all of our Pākehā brothers and sisters, that y'all's culture is actually at risk of being lost.
What culture?
The Pākehā culture is at risk of falling under this snowball of culture from Te Ao Māori. And I am actually fearful for our Pākehā brothers and sisters that their culture may be assimilated.
There will still be pavlovas, Peter, don't you worry.
Oh, but seriously, you know, it is unstoppable. And, you know, what is Pākehā, what is Kiwi, New Zealand Pākehā culture? It's something to think about. It's heavily influenced by Te Ao Māori, and that's why Pākehā culture has some redeeming factors to it. But it's snowballing. You cannot
There's
stop
no
it.
stopping it.
You cannot stop this trajectory of Te Ao Māori
These
growing and expanding.
Desperate attempts by the colonizer. They ain't gonna get anywhere, son.
Kapai.
All right, I think we're done. But yes, clearly a racist suspension. The fact that Trevor Mallard punched someone in the face didn't get a suspension. Winston Peters shook someone by the collar. John Banks didn't get a suspension. David Seymour driving on the steps of Parliament didn't get a suspension. But Te Pāti Māori performing a haka, 21-day suspension, including not being able to vote. Clearly racist, you know, and it just reminds me of that debate they had at the last election of Luxon and Hipkins being asked if New Zealand was a racist country, and both of them said no, it's not a racist country. Wake the hell up. Wake the hell up, Labour. National, obviously, they're white supremacists. Who cares? They don't believe in racism. But Labour, what do you mean it's not a racist country, bro? Anyway. Should we move on to our last and final topic?
That's it for pay equity. We've still got 2 more.
That's meant to be 1.
2 more topics. We've got the Waitangi Tribunal, and then we're going to end on the Regulatory Standards Bill. So, hopefully everyone has seen...
Quick ones, though. Quick ones. It's a fun.
Yeah,
It's
we'll see.
It's almost sleep time.
So, those will know that New Zealand First and National have an agreement, and their coalition agreement, to... They're vague about it, right? They're intentionally vague, but essentially to review the Waitangi Tribunal. And, you know, judged on what's been happening, what they're saying is that they want to take power away from the Waitangi Tribunal. The Waitangi Tribunal has been an incredible place for us to analyze the Crown's breaches of Te Tiriti o Waitangi. And as we've seen from the beginning of this government, you know, National rolling back Te Aka Whaiora, attacking Māori wards, ACT coming in with their Treaty Principles Bill, New Zealand First coming in with their review of the 28 bits of legislation that reference treaty principles. We understand the trajectory, right? E hoa ma, no one is confused on this one. So there's a lot to be nervous of and anxious about in terms of what's going to come of this potential downgrade of the Waitangi Tribunal. I mean, we already saw them try to put Richard Prebble onto the Waitangi Tribunal, right? And he's a previous leader of the ACT Party, Richard Prebble.
Was he there just to collect data?
Here comes the conspiracy theories.
No, but I mean, if he's in the tribunal, does he have access to all the documents?
Yeah, I mean, he would have been privy to a lot of things. I'm sure. But yeah, he didn't last long in the tribunal. So why was he there, right? Why was he there? He was just there for a month or so. I'm not even sure. A very short period of time. And then he resigned, and then he threw some shade on it. I guess maybe it gives him a bit of mana coming from the tribunal to be able to criticize it. I don't know. But so that this isn't the first attack on the tribunal. But anyway, we're going to watch how One News reported on this. And I just think it's funny. You know, who are we looking at right now? We're looking at David Seymour.
It's a New Zealand First coalition agreement, by the way, not an act.
So why are they centering David Seymour? Why are they centering David Seymour when it is a national New Zealand First coalition agreement initiative? It's for us, it's just feeding our conspiratorial brains in terms of them wanting to dump all of the anti-Māori unpopular policies and energy onto one party. One guy in particular, David Seymour, instead of spreading out the responsibilities adequately as we should be doing across all of the parties. Like I said, you know, National have their attacks against Te Iwi Māori, you know, removing Section 7AA. New Zealand First have their issues, but repetitively we are seeing David Seymour centered anytime it comes to the government's anti-Māori, anti-Te Tiriti agenda.
They're Trumpifying him.
He's just their go-to guy. But it's completely inappropriate because I know a lot of people who still think that New Zealand First supports Te Iwi Māori and that for tangata whenua, that New Zealand First are redeemable. And I'll just say, in the last episode, I should have said this at the beginning, a little bit of a correction. I previously said that Winston Peters should be ashamed because New Zealand First's political origins are thanks to the Māori electorates. And some people in the comments were a bit confused about that because he won his own electorate, Tauranga electorate at the time. But the reason why I said what I said was because the only other MP that got in with Winston Peters at that time was Tauhenare, the fella that Trevor Mallard punched in the face. Tauhenare, he won the Te Tai Tokiro electorate. So the only two MPs for New Zealand First when they first became a political party was Winston and someone else from a Māori electorate. We had first past the post voting system instead of MMP at that time. So even though New Zealand First won 7% of the party vote at their first election, they only had 2 MPs. So that's why I say that a lot of their origin comes from the Māori electorates. And then the election after that, they won all 5 of the Māori electorates. And so there is a long history with New Zealand First and their alignments with Te Iwi Māori. And so I find it incredibly problematic in situations like this when it's a clear attack against Te Iwi Māori by New Zealand First, but the media has decided to centre David Seymour. Ka pai? You put it on me a bit late. My rant is over. But I'll put us both on here because I think we're both going to have a lot to say about this little segment. So we'll play it and we'll just pause it every time we've got something to say, which there will probably be a lot.
Is about to get underway with the government today announcing.
Let's bring it back a little bit.
Need to consider very carefully the grave consequences that will
A little bit
result
too much,
from
but I'm
this
not going to play
decision.
with it again because you know we're
Most
just going to spend
teachers are women.
5 minutes
Most
trying to
care
get the
workers are
exact
women.
timestamp.
Demonstrations took place in 18 towns and
Good job.
cities,
Yeah, let's
with
go.
more planned
Good job,
in the
everybody.
South Island
Keep
in
standing
coming
up.
days. A review into the Waitangi Tribunal is about to get underway, with the government today announcing the group tasked to lead it. The move was part of the coalition agreement between National and New Zealand First and aims to refocus the scope and nature of the tribunal's inquiries back to its original intent.
So even just that,
I mean, that's misinformation.
even just that, and I'll replay it a bit, but just listen to what he's saying. He's describing
Tribunal is about,
you know, what the intention of the bill is. But for me, when I hear it,
Like a fact, eh?
it sounds almost like it's a fact, yeah, like you said.
about to get underway, with the government today announcing the group tasked to lead it. The move was part of the coalition agreement between National and New Zealand First and aims to refocus the scope and nature of the tribunal's inquiries back to its original intent. An independent advisory group will lead the review, chaired by Auckland public law expert Bruce Gray, KC. The Green Party's calling it an attempt to limit the tribunal's powers and an attack on the Treaty of Waitangi.
And this we thought was quite interesting. There's no one talking on the side of the tribunal or on the side of Te Iwi Māori, on the side of people who are going to be impacted most by this review. Instead, they're showing some B-roll footage of the Green Party with a megaphone on the steps of Parliament, you know, looking like activists, right? That's the kind of
Just a
message
bunch
that
of
they're trying to
activists.
send, that they're a bunch of activists. And like we've seen in other places, the way that David Seymour, he talks about it in this interview. He says that the Waitangi Tribunal has become too activisty. And so their image that they have chosen for those who are providing the other side of the kōrero is the Green Party, you know, not Te Pāti Māori, not someone from the tribunal themselves, not someone who has taken a settlement, but instead the Greens holding a megaphone on the steps of Parliament.
But ACT leader David Seymour, a vocal critic of the tribunal,
Why are we bringing in David Seymour?
But, you know, no one is interviewed on the side of the tribunal, on the side of Te Iwi Māori. They didn't even interview someone from New Zealand First. But here again, we see David Seymour. And something that I think is interesting is the fact that he is now, you know, after we've just seen the Green Party on the steps of Parliament with a megaphone, we're seeing David Seymour at his desk, looking very professional in his suit.
Tribunal is welcoming the review.
The Waitangi Tribunal.
And then the interview of him actually giving a kōrero.
Different shot.
He's not wearing the tie, you know, he's completely dressed differently. So
Is that a different suit?
he's got no tie on, so
Go back slightly.
so unless he took the tie off for this this
Leader David
segment, they've clearly used some other B-roll where they thought he looked more professional to add on to this part, and I'll just put the audio back up.
For good reasons, to investigate and heal the wounds of the past. Over time, it has transformed into an activist organisation trying to reshape our future without the democratic consent of New Zealanders.
And if you missed it, he just said the Waitangi Tribunal was set up to heal the wounds of the past. And like I said in the little reel that I made, if y'all didn't catch it, that's a lie, what he just said. So for me, he's trying to come across as a nice guy who is acknowledging what we all agree are really important aspects of the tribunal.
Yes.
But a lot of people don't realize that when the Waitangi Tribunal was set up, they could only look into modern day breaches or potentially future breaches of Te Tiriti. They were there to look at new pieces of legislation to see if those new pieces of legislation were at risk of breaching Te Tiriti o Waitangi, or the principles that the tribunal had created. They didn't get the power to actually look back into historical breaches until 10 years after the creation of the Waitangi Tribunal. Not only that, but when the Waitangi Tribunal was created, they primarily leaned on the English text. And I'm not going to call it the English version, but the English text, the Hobson's draft that Margaret Mutu calls it. So you can see, in terms of the inception of the Waitangi Tribunal, just how incomplete it was. And what he's wanting to do is to return us to that more incomplete, less functional time when the Waitangi Tribunal could not look into our history. They don't want to...
He's saying that he's wanting to take it back to a time where it only looked at history.
I think he's lip servicing that one. I know I'm kind of conflicting in my words a little bit here, but I'm saying he's trying to give it energy and acknowledging the good parts that we understand about the tribunal, but he's trying to take powers away from the tribunal. Sorry if that was confusing, but that's what I'm trying to say. He doesn't want us.
Yes.
He doesn't want the current power that the tribunal has.
Yeah.
Sorry if that was confusing. Does that make sense?
It does. And one thing that I've seen from Judith Collins when she was asked in question time about it, and multiple other ministers, is that they are saying, to justify it, that, look, the tribunal itself was saying they couldn't keep up with the cases that they were receiving, that they were already not able to give the best performance that they can. So basically the government is pointing out, it's the classic, we've seen it across the government initiatives. It's the classic defunding of public services in order to say that they're bad so that they can defund them altogether. This is what we're seeing with the Waitangi Tribunal, and them saying, look, the Waitangi Tribunal themselves have been complaining about not being able to keep up with the case load. Okay, but that's because they're underfunded.
Yeah.
But instead, they're using that argument, as if we're all just stupid, to say, oh, that's why we're going to remove all the power from the Waitangi Tribunal. But yeah, I mean, I find the beginning of that news clip also problematic, because they started by saying, at a move aimed to bring it back to its original intention.
Yeah.
As if it was a matter of fact.
Right.
But the original intention was to look at current breaches, and David Seymour is saying we're going to take it back to the time when it was only looking at past breaches. And so that time never even existed.
It's just
and them falling into line with that narrative by saying, oh yes, they're taking back to its original intention as a matter of fact, instead of doing the journalist job and telling you what's, left and right and up and down. That's what they're meant to tell you. They're meant to tell you what was the original intention. Because what happened in that clip is that
the review will begin in the next...
Seymour was able to say that lie, that the real intention of the Waitangi Tribunal was to look at past grievances. But then they didn't correct that. They didn't bring on a Māori legal expert. In fact, like Peter said at the beginning, no one else was interviewed on this kaupapa other than David Seymour. And so basically One News used their platform to spread a lie And a very damaging and a very racist lie at that. And yeah, I don't know if that's worth a complaint, but
I retract what I said in terms of what David
what did you say?
wants. Oh, just my interpretation of that situation. I think he will just throw out whatever kōrero he can to take powers away from the tribunal. He doesn't necessarily want it to go back to its original intention, because if we would go back to its original intention, then it would continue looking at all new bits of legislation to see if they breach te tiriti. I think what he's more saying is, look, it was created to look into the historic traumas of the past,
now.
And we're all pretty much in a post-settlement country now. You know, Luxon talks about that all the time. You know, I think I heard him on a recent interview that there's a conversation to be had, or maybe it's in question time, there's a conversation to be had in terms of the purpose of the Waitangi Tribunal in a post-settlement New Zealand, forgetting potentially that Aotearoa's biggest iwi is yet to settle, Ngāpuhi Nui Tonu. And so I think that's where the conversation is going to go. They're trying to say that the Waitangi Tribunal has served its purpose and that it's now irrelevant. And essentially, it can pack itself up and go home. That's what I'm expecting to come out of this review.
Yeah, I think so too. And I mean, David Seymour was quoted in an article saying that he wants to put the tribunal, quote unquote, in its place. So it's clear that this is about limiting the tribunal. So I do think it's hilarious that other government ministers like Judith Collins are trying to pretend that this is about them improving the tribunal based on the tribunal's own complaints. Like, no, we know you want to get rid of the tribunal and all the work they do. Not just because David Seymour said put it in its place, but because of everything this government has done. Because of the New Zealand First's Waitangi Tribunal Principles Bill deletion, a bill that they put through in the past that they're now trying to bring back. But yeah, someone asked, did the news clarify the tribunal can only make recommendations? No, they did not. Like, this news clip didn't say anything. It pretty much just brought on David Seymour and that was the end of it. Like, yeah, what we showed you was pretty much the whole news clip.
They essentially gave a quote from New Zealand First, gave a quote from the Greens, then an interview with David Seymour. That's it. But yeah, no clarifying of anything. Just a bit of he said, she said, and he said. That's pretty much it.
And this
comment. Anyway, that's all I had to say about the Waitangi Tribunal.
Kapa.
And just, hey, I love the Waitangi Tribunal. I see a lot of people out there talking shit about the Waitangi Tribunal, but just look at the incredible mahi that they do. And I'm going to use that as a nice little smooth segue.
And just, you know,
to talk about the Regulatory Standards Bill.
Can I slip into your segue?
You can slip into there.
Just the fact that, you know, that yes, the tribunal has been prevented from having teeth by the government. They stopped it from being able to make any binding recommendations, so they're just recommendations with no teeth. They stopped them from being able to recommend the return of private land. So many things that this government, that successive governments have done to disable the power of Waitangi Tribunal, but despite that, they've been able to collate, as a historic body, the documentation of hundreds of years. You know, you only need to look at what is it called? Paparahi o te Raki. The review, which found in detail that the chiefs of Ngāpuhi never ceded sovereignty in signing Te Tiriti o Waitangi. These historical documents, they will exist until the end of time. So again, colonizers, it's too late, my people. It's too late to stop the Māori revolution. It's happening. And the work that the tribunal has done is going to inspire generations of people, even if you were to shut it down today.
Kia ora.
All right, you may continue.
Segue away.
Away.
So the Waitangi Tribunal, they make recommendations, as Samar said, that are non-binding to the government. But for them to make these recommendations, a law can't already be passed. So Toitu Te Tiriti, they encouraged everyone to sign on with them as claimants to a case to the Waitangi Tribunal against the Regulatory Standards Bill. Because of how the government has been running with things, right? All of these things under urgency, trying to move as quickly as possible. We saw them move forward the reading of the Treaty Principles Bill, which kind of threw off the timing of the hikoi, made things a little bit touch and go. The reading of the Regulatory Standards Bill has also been brought forward. And so the Waitangi Tribunal had to move things around to hear this case from Toitu Te Tiriti under their own urgency, which I think just speaks to the value of the Waitangi Tribunal in terms of what they're willing to do to speak about, to do their job, you know, but they go above and beyond in terms of ensuring that they're able to do what they can do to give their recommendations. They brought forward this hearing so that it would be able to, so they'd be able to give their findings in time before the legislation is heard in court. The findings of their urgent hearing came out today, and pretty much what they said in it, well, the main thing that they said is that all of the documents for this bill has not been made available to them. So they haven't been able to give a comprehensive ruling around the Regulatory Standards Bill, which again just speaks to the poor lawmaking practices of this government. They're not even giving the Waitangi Tribunal, whose job it is to analyze these policies, to understand the impacts of these policies in terms of breaches of te tiriti. Their own government departments aren't even able to do this mahi because they're not making information available to them. So, you know, the Regulatory Standards Bill is apparently about good policy making. But through everything we've seen with this government, right, all of the fast tracking, this has been the worst pathway, the worst trajectory in terms of policy creation. So for them to be able to try put this bill through to say that it's all about good policy making, you know, obviously the parties who are doing that don't have a track record to stand on to talk at all about what it means to be making good policy. But besides not being able to give that comprehensive perspective on the Regulatory Standards Bill, the Waitangi Tribunal encouraged the government to not proceed anymore with the bill until that information has been made available so that they can give their comprehensive statement. But they did say that so far the Regulatory Standards Bill has breached te tiriti under the principle of partnership, being that no Māori engagement has taken place in terms of the creation or the consultation process for the creation of the Regulatory Standards Bill. And the Waitangi Tribunal said that the bill risks jeopardizing the already, of course, strained relationship that Māori have with the Crown, which is an obvious one, but a very clear one. And it's kind of, it's getting dire for Māori and those of us who work on the inside who really are trying to build up that relationship in a meaningful, you know, mana enhancing, partnership-based kind of perspective. You know, for me, I'm very anti-government, anti-authority. I'm very, you know, we've got to disestablish the whole thing kind of buzz, you know, and for the, it's, you know, we're trying to encourage people to vote and to engage with this political system, right? We're trying to encourage our people to vote and to enroll, and it's very hard to do those things and to make a good argument to people that we should be doing those things when the Crown continues in this way of not engaging with us, purposefully trying to cut our democratic processes. So yeah, it's a hard one. It's a tricky one. If you want to understand the Regulatory Standards Bill, there's a lot to be said about it. It's quite an old bill. Like the Treaty Principles Bill, the Regulatory Standards Bill was created at the same time.
Was it a Rodney Hyde bill? Just like the Treaty Principles Bill.
The Treaty Principles Bill was brought forward by Rodney Hyde. Roger Douglas was the leader of ACT when the Regulatory Standards Bill came through. I think it was under Roger Douglas who brought that one forward. But watch Rihanna's video about the Regulatory Standards Bill if you want to understand more. It's a great video that she's got on TikTok, Instagram. She talks about how David Seymour's own Ministry for Regulations, they don't even support the bill. His own Ministry of Regulations does not support this Regulatory Standards Bill, which is pretty interesting.
It's kind of like how the Select Committee and a lot of the bills that they're passing have been against the bill. So the government, itself, because the government is just not one or two people, right? It's a whole big machine. And yes, often the select committees and the people reviewing the government bills are saying, no, don't pass this, or, have more discussions on it. And the government has been ignoring their own government all along.
Definitely have a listen to the 7-minute video if you want to understand the Regulatory Standards Bill. Essentially, the way that I see the Regulatory Standards Bill, it's creating essentially more bureaucracy. The way that Tanya Waikato explained it was that it's creating a gate that all policies must, it's like a little border control. And any policy that passes through there has to align with this set of neoliberal policies. And these neoliberal policies are basically based around the protection of private property and free market capitalism, libertarian values. And, how the Waitangi Tribunal works, you have to take a case to the Waitangi Tribunal. And it's not applied to every law, what the Waitangi Tribunal can, give feedback on. It's only in relation to if there are breaches to te tiriti. But this new gate that's going to be created by the Regulatory Standards Bill will be applied to every single bill that goes through our government. It's outrageous. It gives power to corporations and takes power away from us and our government and gives it to multinational corporations.
Well, that's the thing, is that they're projecting their own destruction of democracy onto Māori, onto the indigenous people of this country, because they themselves know, and they knew this before the election, that's why they ran on a whole platform of democracy. They know that they're going to be following the interests of their wealthy donors against all the principles of democracy. And we've seen this across the range, but this bill, if passed, it would just absolutely destroy the whole concept of democracy, because every bill that passes needs to pass according to these ACT Party principles. So yes, it's just a perfect example of how they project and fearmonger on things like the Waitangi Tribunal, on things like the treaty principles, when they themselves are bringing in principles that will be A, more binding, and B, more destructive, whereas the treaty principles were actually protective of the environment. So it's just to convince New Zealanders to basically vote for things that are against their own well-being.
And I just think it's funny. Everything that these people complain about in terms of the power that the Waitangi Tribunal has, which is nothing, right? They can only make recommendations. But as you say, it's a narratives-based thing, and they provide arguments which provide justifications for other things. So, but largely they're powerless. But anyway.
Well, I can hear a possum hard out.
We're going to have to ignore
on our deck.
We're going to have to just ignore the possum for the duration of the stream. It's all good.
What are they tipping over though?
Stay focused. They criticize the Waitangi Tribunal. But this new thing that the ACT Party is trying to bring in, and they have tried to rush it through as fast as possible. They have tried to avoid as much consultation as possible. They have tried to avoid all of the good kind of things that are foundational to policy, good policy making. And they're going to introduce something that is just no exaggeration, 20 times more powerful, 100 times more powerful than the Waitangi Tribunal. And so they're so disingenuous with the concerns that they raise around the Waitangi Tribunal. They're just happy for this other thing that's so much more powerful than the Waitangi Tribunal to just be slipped under our noses. And I just wonder, you know, these people who criticize the Waitangi Tribunal, do they understand the implications of a bill like this in terms of how it's going to impact all of us? Or are they just dying and desperate to, in any way, shape or form, get rid of anything that gives power and energy to Te Iwi Māori, to the decolonization of Aotearoa? Are they willing to do anything to change that trajectory? Do they understand the implications of themselves in supporting these parties?
I think, you know, this is something I said to you before, and it's a kind of thing that I would like to believe is not true, but it feels to me like this government was able to hoodwink, to trick New Zealand into voting for policies that work actively against their own interests purely by capturing their racism against Māori. They were able to trick everyone into voting for National just because they fed their fear, mistrust, and hatred of Māori people. I hope that I'm wrong on this, and that they really just did vote for them, hoping for better economic management. But it feels to me like a lot of people, a lot of voters in this country, specifically are voting against Māori and voting to suppress and control Māori. And if that's the case, then I do think that that requires different solutions from us. It's probably a different kaupapa for a different episode to discuss, but yeah, it's something to think about. That were people just tricked into voting for National, or did they really just hone in on people's racism? And if you know, a good chunk, you know, 40% of the country are that racist, then there's something that we have to contend with and something that we have to face and deal with accordingly.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's a strategy they've been using for a long time, hooking into people's racism. I think it's the ambiguity. You know, I think we do live in an inherently racist country. We are a settler colonial country, and so the colony has had to suppress Te Iwi Māori to elevate themselves for a very long time, and that has become the norm. And we've been trying to claw our way out of that for a while, I would say. We have a lot of beautiful people, a lot of good-intentioned people here in Aotearoa, a lot of people who aren't racist, but they fall into a bit of a space where they probably repeat some, you know, anti-Māori rhetoric because it has been normalized and they probably don't realize it. And, you know, that space of that gray space, that ambiguous space, it's weaponized a lot. And I think, you know, we saw it with He Puapua, right? He Puapua came out. It was just a discussion document, but everyone freaked out. Oh, you're going to have to stop doing that, baby. Everyone freaked out at He Puapua. Everyone freaked out. And like someone is saying in the comment section, let's talk about what a Māori government would look like. And I agree. That's a good kaupapa for us to...
Sounds like a whole discussion topic of its own.
But it's a great topic for us to touch on, because we just need to start fleshing these things out. And for some governments, it is scary to flesh those things out and to add kōrero to it, because it has been ambiguous for a really long time, and the colony has relied on it being ambiguous for a very long time. So it's a hard thing to wrestle with. That's why I think the right have done well in further blurring everything and hooking into that ambiguity to hook into people's fears. It does need to be addressed, but I don't think that we can't come back from this. I have inherent faith in the people of Aotearoa. I'll put it that way. I have inherent faith in our people to be able to come back from this. I don't think we're corrupted to the core. I think we can be a world leader in terms of respecting Indigenous rights here in Aotearoa. But it's going to take a lot of mahi.
It's not going to be a 5-hour show.
If you stop derailing us, we can get we
fault,
can get to the end of this. Just a few more things that we need to go over in terms of regulatory standards. Something that I wanted to pull up. It's funny talking about that He Puapua document. Eric Crampton, he is a member of the New Zealand Institute. And sometimes we talk about, Taxpayers Union and all of these different arms of the Atlas network. Eric Crampton and the New Zealand Initiative. It was the New Zealand Initiative, they were called the Business Roundtable at the time, who first created this idea of the Regulatory Standards Bill. They were the ones who first created the idea of it. ACT didn't even exist at the time. Roger Douglas, who was a Labour MP at the time, he took the advice from this Business Roundtable, who later became the New Zealand Initiative, and he started working with the Labour Party at the time to slowly move through the paces of bringing the Regulatory Standards Bill to fruition. Roger Douglas later left Labour, of course, and created the ACT Party, and then with the help of other people like Rodney Hyde and Richard Prebble, they started progressing this Regulatory Standards Bill. And I've just brought up this tweet from Eric Crampton because I think it's funny. They released a discussion document on the Regulatory Standards Bill, and it caused a stir. And the ACT Party, you can see them down there, they said, over the summer, the left have got themselves into a lather about the Regulatory Standards Bill. This week's edition of Free Press takes a closer look at the bill, blah, 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 blah. But basically they're saying, oh, geez, calm down, hey, there's nothing to see here, there's nothing to see here. Don't worry about the Regulatory Standards Bill.
Oh, and this argument from Eric is so stupid. It's not yet before Parliament. Like, okay, but it's going to, and then it's going to pass because Parliament's got a majority. This argument that you can't speak on it until the one day it's going to be in Parliament through urgency. Then you can speak about it on that one day. Okay, Eric Crampton.
And,
how about we can talk about it whenever the hell we like? How about that?
And they're the fast track government. We were all very rightly very concerned.
No, they like to dictate the time and the how we resist.
And so
Unwritten form within 24-hour period, please.
And so anyway, the ACT Party, they released some statements. And where is it?
Just derailing the kōrero again. You know how it be.
You know how it is. So Jane Kelsey, she gave some feedback about this discussion document that the New Zealand Initiative released around the Regulatory Standards Bill, and they called her hard left, Auckland law professor Jane Kelsey. And so I thought, hey, I'll look into what Jane Kelsey has been saying. She put together a submission against the Regulatory Standards Bill.
Thanks, ACT.
Great mahi by Jane Kelsey. It's funny, when I first heard about the Regulatory Standards Bill, I thought of Jane Kelsey because everything about the Regulatory Standards Bill, well, a lot of it, reminded me about the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement, and Jane Kelsey was one of our leaders who worked to do advocacy around the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement back in those days. And this is how I learnt about the New Zealand Initiative being the origin of the Regulatory Standards Bill, thanks to Jane Kelsey. But yeah, really recommend reading her submission if you want to hear someone who's really knowledgeable in this space. But the main thing I learned from Kelsey was that this bill has already been through Parliament multiple times, 3 times, where it has failed to pass the sniff test. This is a bill that is supposedly about good policy, good lawmaking. And in Rihanna's video, she points out that New Zealand is in the top 1% in terms of being acknowledged for our good regulation. We're in the top 1%. And so because it hasn't passed the sniff test through Parliament 3 times, as Jane Kelsey points it out, it's quite clear that it's simply a small minority who are trying to push this through. And this has come from the Business Roundtable, right? It's very clear, coming from Roger Douglas and now just the ACT Party, that it's coming from a very small minority of Aotearoa. Very, very, very small minority. And what they call good policy making doesn't pass the sniff test for the rest of us. So if you're wanting to understand more of the origins of the Regulatory Standards Bill, highly recommend you check out Jane Kelsey's submission. But besides that, e whama, I think we've made it to the end of the stream.
Yep. I think
No thanks to the derailer.
I'd like to agree with Mr. Arvid, who says that I was not the reason for the derailment of the show, Mr. Spider Petty. I'm not sure why that's your nickname in the show, but it is.
Because you keep putting my sideways.
What?
I'm Spider Petty with the sideways when you keep. See, look.
Huh?
Now I'm Spider Petty.
Oh.
Anyway.
That wasn't.
I don't know why it's doing this.
Exactly. See, it's not my fault. Anyway, moving on.
Okay.
A couple of responses to comments I wanted to make as we close the show. Thank you all for waiting on your BHN show and sticking with us while we finalize. No, I do not know about Uncle Winnie's proposed changes to the Regulatory Standards Bill, but that sounds interesting. I'm going to Google it right after this. Someone said, oh, I've lost the comment I wanted to respond to.
Let me just make that bigger.
Kapai.
But yeah, there you go.
Someone earlier said, what would they do if they don't feel like they can physically join protests and stuff to resist? Just keep doing what you're doing and keep putting your own voice out there in any way, shape, or form. There are a lot of things that we can do. We're currently fighting an information age, so any contribution that you can make towards correct information is great mahi. It's great mahi. Don't ever minimize from that, from sitting at home at your computer or at your phone, putting out correct information in the world.
Yeah. And just doing research. Yeah, don't undervalue just a good old bit of research, just a good old bit of reading. Just so that you can give yourself the confidence to have informed opinions so that you can have meaningful conversations with people in your circle of influence. Don't undervalue those things. Like, it can be hard, but having these kinds of conversations at the dinner table with your family, with your friends, at mahi, you don't have to be out on the streets shouting or making videos. That backroom slow mahi is essential.
The submissions, all of that stuff. Yep, we'll check out that newsroom article, Arvid's. And
well, then there's the submissions as well. That's another layer, you know? Submissions, of course, voting, not just in general, but in local elections. But above simply enrolling to vote and doing submissions, for those of us who are able to, I think the most important thing for us to do in terms of protest is to get out there and protest against the fast track projects. Any fast track project.
Yes, absolutely.
Because, you know, what is the Regulatory Standards Bill all about? It's to try and give more power or more clarity to corporations. And, you know, what is the rolling back of the Waitangi Tribunal about? It's so that there isn't that extra layer of scrutiny from a te tiriti perspective. In all of these instances, it's just so you can remove a layer of protection and open the door for industry. And the fast track proposals are things that are currently going through right now. A lot of the other things that we've been talking about are narrative-based things or things that Labour has said they will roll back. But the fast track projects, which are direct breaches of te tiriti, direct attacks to our local democratic processes, those are all happening right now. You know, the National Party did not need the Treaty Principles Bill to roll back Te Aka Whai Ora. They don't need the Regulatory Standards Bill to open up conservation land to mining industries. So there's all of these things that we are talking about and trying to learn about and make submissions on. But for me, the most powerful thing, the most effective thing that we can be doing right now is protesting against these fast track proposals. But
protesting from home if you have to.
Protest from home if you have to. Share valuable kōrero on your socials and with people in your circles of influence. Learn about these projects so that when it comes on the news, you can say to your friends, oh, that was bullshit.
Yeah.
Rah, rah, rah.
Honestly, just talking to your family and friends is super radical in this day and age. And you're absolutely right, Kai Matara. It's Ma'al Salama in Arabic. Ka kite anō. Thank you all so much for joining our very long stream tonight, but super fruitful, and we're really happy that we've gotten back to our short 1-minute reels during the week. So you can expect to see our at least 4 reels a week before our weekly stream. And yes, we will. Someone brought up the idea of us bringing on Te Pāti Māori on the show. We absolutely plan on doing that. In 3 weeks' time, as we promised you, we'll be having our first ever interviewee on the show. It's going to be a really special guest talking about really important kōrero.
Who is it?
No. It's a surprise.
Oh,
yes, it's a surprise apparently for you as well. But yes, we promised that it would be in 3 shows' time. In 3 shows' time, it will be. And from then on, yes, we plan
keep our
to
election
grow.
promises.
We plan to bring on representative to Pāti Māori, Greens, and hopefully we'll grow enough to have Labour and other parties on as well. But for now, we're just super happy to have all of you here with us, joining us tonight. It's honestly our deepest pleasure to be here, joined by you all. So incredibly humbled that you choose to join us here every week. Hope the rest of you have a really lovely night. Enjoy Chen if that's where you're going on after this, or otherwise enjoy your night off with your loved ones, whānau, or if you're lucky enough to have a night alone tonight. But regardless, that wasn't the jibe at my dear husband.
Sure.
Have a lovely rest of your Friday night. Thank you for joining us all. Ka kite anō. See you next week, Friday at 6 p.m. Ka kite anō. Love you all. Bye.
Kite. Sleeping on the couch tonight. Nah. Love y'all. Thank y'all so much. Pō Māori.
See you next week.